Hey guys, welcome to Green Bean Fiction. So in today's video we are gonna see what if Deku became a manipulator and had harem. MHA Xcode Geass, Part 2. Before starting, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you are interested in MHA fanfictions. This story is The Obedience Hero, Zero by Distorted Battler 2. Now without wasting any more time, let's dive in. Izuku Pav. A rather familiar feeling overwhelmed my senses for the first time in almost a month. I was sprawled out on a gym mat, after being washed like a dirty dish by my new associate, Percival. His mask was within the confines of his backpack, mine left back at my abode. We had been sparring quirklessly to test our base abilities, especially if we were to face someone like Eraserhead, or someone with a heat-proof quirk. I had expected him to have relied only on his quirk, and that blade that gained him his reputation. Yet of course this was the one time I was wrong. His fittingly indigo eyes hardly looked upon me with distaste, but he shook his head every time he bested me, which only served as a confusing factor as I got tossed like dough. I sluggishly lifted my head up to look up at him, only seeing a look of confusion in return. I know you aren't bad. But that was just embarrassing. There were so many moments where you could have gotten the upper hand, or landed a couple more hits, but it's like you were blatantly ignoring them. Percy criticized with the same look of confusion adorning his sharpened face. Sorry, I guess I'm just not at the top of my game today. I speculated to myself in slight shame, not understanding how after all of the training I've been through, I was doing that poorly. Percy soon approached, and stood next to my saddening figure. Look, I know we are far from the point of emotional talks, and I am no person to be asking about anything emotion-related. But is there something on your mind? His sudden question stunned me for a brief moment, as I contemplated what my answer should be, soon coming to a conclusion. Something has come up recently. It's quite the strange event, so I find it unnecessary to start to ramble. Before I could find a way to continue, he had already began to respond. Trust me, Izuku. I have seen and heard the most fucked up things you could possibly imagine, so try me. I let out a heavy sigh, and shut my eyes in thought, soon picking my battered body up and off the mat. All right. To put it simply, after we made contact, I went home, wanted to have a shower, and walked in on someone who I have respected and loved for almost my whole life. Masturbating while moaning my name. A flat line. His lips simply formed a straight line across his face, and he stared directly into my eyes in simple confusion. Too interesting. He responded monotonously, his pupils shrunk exponentially. It's even worse, considering the fact I have a girlfriend. And I didn't even tell the whole story. At that, he just glared at me in utter bewilderment, his blank expression contorting into slight annoyed curiosity. You had my curiosity, but now you have my attention. With a hassled breath, I waltzed toward a bench like I had several times before during my previous training, took a seat, and began to recall the events of a few days back. Izuku Pav. A week earlier, NSFW warning, several things ran through my ears like an Olympic sprinter. The sound of the shower still running, the sound of my ragged breathing, the voice of my mom rushing down the hall to try and stop what had already happened, and the voice of the nude and ecstatic aunt of mine, leaning against the wall of said shower, moaning softly to herself shamelessly. What got my heart thumping faster with each passing second, what woke me up from my previous drowsiness, was the fact that she was looking into my eyes as she reached her orgasm. Not an ounce of anxiety, shame, or fear in her eyes as she let out one euphoric sigh of pleasure after another. Mom eventually made her way to the doorway, and took in the scene for herself. I expected her to start yelling out in anger at her for being so careless or lewd, but instead, I saw two emotions on her face. Her cheeks were flushed in a rosy hue, and in her eyes, her thoughts were clear as day. She was jealous. Mitsuki? What the hell do you think you're doing? She shouted in varying tones, such as anger, shock, jealousy, and embarrassment. Mitsuki was high off of ecstasy, and could only pant like a dog, her legs quivering happily. I'm living a little, Inko, I'm being honest with what I want. And that man right there. MMMPH, he feels good, Mitsuki responded shamelessly, still not hiding even an inch of her skin. I stood silently, my cheeks burning a bright pink as Mom and Aunt Mitsuki continued to argue. What the hell do you think you're saying? That's my son you're talking about. Have you no shame? Mom asked in jealous anger, glaring daggers at the nude cougar. Oh, lighten up Inko, if you tried this, then you would understand, I haven't felt that good ever before in my life, not even during sex with Masaru. This boy is just perfect. I stumbled backwards, and leaned against the hallway wall in disbelief, unable to process what was being said right in front of me. Why, you can't seriously be serious? You're completely nude in front of my damn son. Are you crazy or something? Mitsuki was quick to reply. Are you jealous or something? Before I could even process what was being said, Mom said one more thing that effectively made me lose it. So what if I am? Am I not allowed to love who I want? As my mind began to bounce around my skull, they continued to argue as if I wasn't even there. Ooh, Inko has a crush on her son. How devious. Mom continued to blush brilliantly, Mitsuki happy as can be while I was struggling to breathe. I staggered toward my bedroom in silence, finally shutting my door to drown out the mind-numbing argument they were having. Auntie Mitsuki and my own mother both have crushes on me. I was so confused, scared, tired, and oddly happy in a sense. I know I love my mom, and Mitsuki has played a massive role in my life. I was ashamed at the fact I was even barely enjoying the thought of such nasty things that involved Mitsuki, and especially my mom, so I slapped myself across the face, and laid my weary head to rest on my bed, falling into a deep slumber in mere moments. NSFW stops here. Izuku Pav, the next morning. The first thing on my mind wasn't the business with Indigo, or the events with my mom and aunt. The first thing on my mind was to stretch my limbs above my head, and go to the kitchen for breakfast. Maybe it was a simple stress response to the whole ordeal, but it didn't matter for long, as I saw my mom standing in the kitchen, and immediately remembered everything. Mitsuki sat silently on the living room couch, finally being fully clothed, and her face adorned with a look of worry. Hey honey, how'd you sleep? Mom asked me slowly with a strained smile, seemingly terrified of what I might say. I slept fine, I guess. I answered in an untalkative manner, unable to look her or Mitsuki in the eye without blushing. Listen. About last night. WWE, Mitsuki started, but I quickly cut her off. It's fine. Yays, just forget about it. I raised my voice more than I had initially planned to, and before I could mumbling like usual, I quickly went back to my room to change, no longer feeling hungry for breakfast. I soon arrived in the living room again, dressed in black shorts and a gray t-shirt, running over to the front porch to grab my classic red shoes. I'm going to the gym for a few hours, I called without looking back, walking out the front door. Looks like home struggles aren't over just yet. Izuku Pav. Present time. I had just finished recalling the story to Percy, and my cheeks were a bright pink once again, but when I looked over to where he was stood before, he wasn't there. When I looked around for the typically colorful yet colorless vigilante, I saw him typing furiously on a phone. My phone. Percy? What are you? Before I could get a response, or even finish my sentence, I heard the noise of a message being sent. Come to think of it, I heard it 2 more times during my retelling. Percival simply stared at me with a blank expression, but with a mischievous glint in his eyes. I'm fixing your issues for you, you're welcome. I strutted over, and yoinked my phone out of his hand to see what he had typed. My pupils dilated temporarily, as I noticed that he not only wrote a message to my mother and Mitsuki, but to Colin as well. How did you know WHWHO to message? I asked frantically, after noticing that each message had been read. Colin was the only other female contact on your phone aside from Mitsuki. And Mom. It wasn't exactly impossible to guess. 2 the messages were simple requests to the aforementioned women to come to the public gym we were using, and I could feel my mind sink into a state of terror. Percival. WHWHY the hell would why you? As I rambled, he quickly cut me off. The best way to address an issue is to tackle it head-on. Letting a worry or a problem fester will only lead to further suffering once the after effects come to light. Besides, they all love you to death, so I'm sure that everything should be fine. As soon as he said that, I could already hear the bickering of my mother and Mitsuki, and I immediately began to try and run, only to be yanked back by the wrist. As I looked back to use my Geass on the bastard, I could see that he had his eyes closed with a cheeky little grin bedecking his disgusting face. Come now, Midoriya, where the hell do you think you're going? They came here just for you, he mused mockingly, before shoving me in the direction of the 3 most important women in my life, my mom, my aunt, and my girlfriend. Inko looked away shyly, Mitsuki looked at the floor in what I assumed to be slight shame, and Colin seemed perfectly content with just looking at me. Percival had gone to another side of the gym to do a set of the leg press with as much weight as he could find, as I took in a deep breath to address the elephant in the gym, only to be beaten to the punch. "Hey, who are these two?" Colin asked cluelessly with a bob of her head, causing me to flinch. "Well, that's my mom, and that's my aunt Mitsuki," I began to say, attempting to find the right words to say, while Colin as per usual would continue to interrupt my thought process. "Well, why are they here?" she asked similarly to before. "Well, there's something we need to talk. I'm a terrible mother who has a son complex," Mom blurted out midway through my sentence, getting Mitsuki to smack herself across the face. I looked down to the floor, not having expected her to just say it outright. My cheeks were emblazoned in a scarlet hue. Mom was on the verge of one of her iconic sobbing sessions, and Mitsuki just looked annoyed with herself. I had expected to watch Colin just turn around and walk away out of sheer detestment, but after a while I began to hear gut-busting laughter from her direction. "Okay, let me guess. The three of you all like each other, knowing full well it's weird, but you're restricting yourself out of common decency. What a cliché," she mused teasingly, and strangely accurately. "Colin, you've been watching harems, haven't you?" I state, rather than ask. "Fuck you, they're funny when they're bad, and hot when it gets good." I pinched the bridge of my nose both in irritation and amusement, as Colin began to scramble back to her previous point. "Look, why you get what I'm getting at. You like me, you like your aunt, and you like your mom. You want a way to be happy with all of us, and it just so happens that a very cringy romance category is your answer," she rambled with a blush that matched her hair. I was now greatly intrigued, and confused, while Mom looked absolutely dumbfounded. Mitsuki, on the other hand, looked eager, and quickly locked arms with Colin. "I can agree to that arrangement," she spouted eagerly, as me and Mom looked at her with blank faces. Me and Mom looked at each other in silence, not knowing what to say. "Look, you both know that you want to, so why worry about awkwardness, or anything for that matter? Everything about us is weird, so why feel so uncomfy?" In response to Colin's reasoning, me and Mom looked at each other briefly, before nodding with a nervous smile each. "See? Now we have a lot more options for romance. Hell, we could expand, and make lonely nights even less lonely," Mitsuki chimed in while still snuggled up to Colin immaturely. Mitsuki eventually seemingly made a realization, and walked over to me with a seductive smirk, immediately sending a wave of fear and arousal down my spine. As she grew closer to me, and Colin began to follow closely behind, they began to drag me toward the male bathroom. "Mom, I guess I should call her Inko now?" Inko began to follow slowly behind, clearly as nervous as me. I knew that sex was out of the question, but even kissing with these three might be nerve-wracking. Percival paused. While Izuku dealt with his bullshit, I was just finishing my set of 500 pounds on the leg press, a wee bit underwhelmed by the lack of intrigue of challenge from the minuscule amount of weight or power. As I was hopping off the press, I could hear shouting from the weight section of the gym, which pissed me off, as there was a strict no yelling or screaming rule. I jogged my way over to the dumbbell rack, looking for the culprit of the annoying shouting. I eventually found a moderately tall boy with ash blonde hair struggling to lift a 50 pounds dumbbell, and shouting at a middle-aged man who was seemingly telling him to stop or leave. As I got closer, I could hear that the blonde was incredibly profane with his tongue, and he had another boy with a bit more of a golden blonde head of hair next to him. "Listen, kid, there is a strict policy against your behavior. Look at the damn sign, there's no yellin'. Oh, shut the hell up. You know damn well that if you tell me to leave, I'll send you to hell and back. You're nothing to me. In fact, you should just go die right now." The ash blonde shouted like a 10-year-old on a COD lobby, as his tacky-haired friend chuckled it up as if they were above the poor guy. "Just leave us be, you old battle axe. Bakugo is beyond you in every way, so just leave with your dignity intact." The boy with the golden blonde hair laced with tacky lightning bolts sprinkled throughout. "No, you two need to leave, now. This isn't the place for games and immature children like you pricks." One in response to the man standing up for himself and his gym, the ash blonde now named Bakugo brought his hand up and threw an explosion at their face, knocking them back, and urging me to run to his aid. "Stay down for your own good, you can't beat a hero course student with that little talent or worth. Just go jump off the nearest building you can find, and maybe you can come back with something that makes you worth a bit more." 2. I heard the man click his tongue in embarrassment. As I stood up at his side, I let out an annoyed sigh, and patted the man on the shoulder, whispering a slight praise as I began to glare at the 2 supposed UA students. Alright then, heroes, I'm going to ask you to leave, once only. Or I'm going to make you. I knew I couldn't do the same things now as I could when I had my hair dye rinsed out, and the mask on, but these 2 were easy pickings. Who the hell do you think you are, you prick? You think you can Jew? As the tacky-looking kid began to speak, I chopped his neck with a bit of added force from my uncharacteristically blue fire. As the explosive blonde brought up his hands to blast me, I simply booted him in the ribs, knocking him down, as I got down on one knee to chop him in his neck pressure point just like I had his friend. With both of them unconscious, I picked them up on my shoulder, each of them occupying the same one, as I nodded to the man while carrying them to the exit. As I walked down the halls, I walked past the male bathroom, only to hear satisfied moans from who I could only assume to be Izuku and his new accomplishment. I let out a groan of annoyance and also amusement at how quickly he had gone from being terrified of women to having a harem that was a bit closer than even just girlfriends. 2. I tossed the 2 boys out of the gym, turning around soon after to go to the male locker room so I could head home myself. The weights, and even the fights have bored me here. I guess I should go on a patrol tonight. Yeah. That sounds more entertaining. Percival Pav. Yeah, I get it, Mr. Romantic. Go back to your concubines, and let me do what I do best. You do know I've been doing this longer than you, right? I spoke through the phone that I had been supplied rather teasingly toward my favorite historic cosplayer, whilst I stood atop a muck-coated edge of an apartment building's roof, a smirk behind my charcoal black guise, my hair free of the equally dark dye of my daily routine. You shut up this fucking second, or I'll make you, he said while obviously gagging with me, earning a dry chuckle from my smoke-induced lungs. Alright, I get it, yaw softy, I'll get to it. Have fun relaxing whilst I do literally all the work. I tease once again, not even waiting for a reply as I shut off my phone, disconnecting myself from the internet as to reduce any noise I may emit. My smirk from earlier quickly ran away from my face, and I leapt from the rooftop with a bit more force to gain air. When I ran out of momentum and began to lose altitude, I tossed out my chained kunai and began to swing from building to building, the chains making shockingly little noise with each swing. Landing on another vacant rooftop, I began to run with the momentum I gained from the constant swinging, my hood blowing behind in tandem with my medium-length, fittingly indigo hair. My backpack clung to my back securely, containing supplies I would give to saved victims. This kind of thing used to be so exhilarating, but nowadays it has only been normal. I leapt over a gap between 2 buildings, and saw a rather silent mugging in the alley in between. The small glance I was able to see as I leapt showed me 2 shady men holding a young woman hostage, one knife to her neck. Letting my kunai loose, it locked itself to the edge of the roof I was leaping to, allowing me to yank myself back, swing down to the scene, draw the kunai from my palms, and strike down the 2 men, their blood coating both my kunai and my upper cheek. The young woman shrieked in shock and fear, the blood clearly triggering her, and she instinctively began to activate her relatively weak quirk. I let out a tired sigh, tossed her a small pack from my backpack, and scaled back up the way that whence I came. I could still hear her frantic breathing from below as I began to run again, soon leaping from another rooftop to begin swinging again. I swung in relative silence, hearing naught but a peep from the seemingly empty alleys and streets below. Finally, after a few minutes of nothing, I heard an incredibly loud roar from a decently far-off bridge, to which I obviously began to fly towards at an incredible pace. After around 63 seconds, I was quite close to said bridge, and I could see a rather large man, taller than most arches bedecking the large bridge. He was booting down several metal support beams for the aforementioned arches, seemingly in a drunken state. Lights across separate sectors of Tokyo began to turn off in the loud wake of the drunken lunatic as I reached the arches of the bridge, grinding on the soon-to-be collapsing arches as my heels ignited in purple flame. Hey buddy? Are you gonna sit down, shut up, and/or go home, or am I gonna have to see if pre-consumed alcohol is flammable or not? The beast just roared at me, loads of saliva shooting out like bullets as I squinted my eyes tightly, forming a heat barrier after around 4 seconds just to dry myself of the foul fluids. Well, I guess I have my answer. I mused with my eyes still squinted, and my head tilting as I began to bolt across the relatively flattened curve of the arch, drawing my ignition stick as I ran. The giant had no cars around to make himself have some sense of projectiles, so I was mostly safe to run around him to just gain momentum. Of course, I had to fucking jinx myself, and his fingers opened up, beginning to shoot nails at me. No, not construction nails, human nails, and sharpened ones at that. Letting out a groan of disgust, I cut through the first 20 or so, before sidestepping, and bolting toward his right ankle, slashing through his fibula, and leaping up his green-veined leg, cutting upward the whole time as he dropped to one knee with another guttural roar. With a snap of my fingers, I blasted myself down, cutting into his exposed gut, entering his inner systems, and immediately smelling a strong scent of alcohol. With a small little grin, I placed my hot blade to the edge of his stomach, and flames began to course through his body faster than a cougar would devour a small child. Leaping out of the little gap I made within the beast, I could hear the agonizing roars of the beast behind me. I decided not to spare the bastard a glance, and began to use a heat aura to evaporate any fluids that coated my body, steam cleaning myself from head to toe. With a loud thud, I heard the massive body of the lardy giant crash to the floor of the road. Back in my second year of being, well, me, I would have likely been hyperventilating and laughing at my success, but I am simply bored now. In the distance, I could see several heroes, clearly groggy from a sudden awakening, racing towards my direction, or better yet, the guy the first just killed. I saw only a couple notable ones, like Crust, who was oddly energetic for someone who supposedly just woke up, and Kamui Woods, who was incredibly tired, but also incredibly pissed after seeing me. Me and Twiggy over here have had our fair share of encounters during my time as Indigo, and he has yet to best me even once. I mean, it's basic science, fire burns wood. Most would run, or try to hide, but I was too bored to even see the possible threats. What's the difference between an average man and a man made of wood? I shouted giddily as the heroes approached, absolutely loving the sight of Kamui's eyes squinting in annoyance. I swear to God, tonight's the night I'll finally see you shut the hell up, he retorted as Crust kept up the same goofy grin, his eyes for some reason on the verge of tearing up. What's the matter? You bored of how many wood puns I've thrown at you? Don't worry, it's pine. I responded snarkily, as he sent a large contorted trunk fist straight toward me in blind anger, as I sidestepped it while letting a few purple sparks ignite the wood. He had already disconnected the trunk from his main body, so I simply looked him in the eye snarkily while I expanded the sparks to incinerate the entire unit of bark. You know, I think you should look back on yourself, maybe branch out into a new work field. Hero work just isn't really cutting it. I taunted further, as he prepared another bark fist, only to be cut off by Crust throwing a crusted shield toward me attempting to wound me, only for me to move to the side with minimal effort. Krusty, what's got you so upset? You not used to waking up this early? 5, exactly, he responded sincerely, as he tearfully began to form brass knuckles out of miniature crusted shields. Ah. I actually feel bad now. Oh well, at least I have no qualms beating Woody's ass, I said with slight grief, as Crust rushed forward quite quickly. I blocked a left hook, another left, blocked a right, then took a nasty kick to the ribs from his left leg, that was incast in more little shields, earning him a grunt of annoyance from me as Kamui began to prepare his signature move. With another grunt of annoyance, I caught his next left hook with my own left, and began to rapidly blast him in his now exposed ribs with relatively strong flame-induced punches, booted him in the chest to gain distance, and drawed my blade again to try and neutralize him, but he was able to deflect my blade with a relatively large shield, and shoved said shield into my shoulder, crying the whole time. As I saw Kamui's lacquered chain prison approaching, I had to boot Crust off of me again, and kick off the ground and over the aforementioned capture move, and snap a violet shot straight toward him, setting Woody ablaze as he quickly ran to the edge of the bridge to jump into the water below. I refused to expand the fire too much, simply because he was too funny to tease, and seeing him die would be upsetting. Before I could get distracted by Kamui's fall, several different blasts of energy from the different nameless heroes were hurled toward me mindlessly while Crust stepped back in confusion, having completely forgotten of the other cowardly heroes, looking to take advantage of the injury they played no part in. I dodged each shot with relative ease, and with a bit of effort and a grunt of irritation, I yanked the shield out of my shoulder, and began to regenerate. I sighed with a hint of boredom, snapping my fingers and creating a large bright flash of violet light, blinding the nons in the crowd while I ran toward them with my beloved ignition stick in hand. After cutting down the nons, unworried of if they would live or die, and went back to glaring down Crust as he began to rush me again, this time wielding 2 shields in his hands. He tossed one at me for me to cut down, and then we got into a standstill while I didn't want to harm him too greatly by just cutting through his shield. "You're still sobbing, man? What gives?" As I asked, he only began to sob more. "You killed my fellow heroes for sport, you bastard," he yelled out passionately, his tears showing no sign of stopping anytime soon. "Those fellow heroes of yours were planning to kill me, and take credit for your hard work. They were cowards, who were taking advantage of you for the kind of guy you are." As I shouted at him, he expanded his shield to the size of a wall, signaling for me to jump over said wall only to see him launching another shield at me, only for me to strike it down. As I landed, he rushed toward me once again, only this time with a much more jagged shield, catching me off guard, and knocking my ignition stick out of my hand. "You are beaten, vigilante. Don't make me have to go further." More much larger shields began to form behind him in a menacing manner, as I for the first time in a while, felt a surge of intrigue. "Well, I didn't think I'd have to try against you, but here we are." Using the wall I previously jumped over, I latched my chain to it, and flew toward it to gain a bit of a vantage point, and an easier way to get to my weapon. He launched another shield at me, but I leapt with as much force as I thought necessary, bolting toward the place where my overly complicated lighter sat idly, and picked it back up, waiting to ignite it. "Indigo, this is your last chance to surrender, don't make me." Before he could finish his sentence, I snapped a bullet of violet flame straight toward his communicator at his hip, destroying his one chance to call for backup. "Oh, trust me. This isn't my last chance. It's yours," were the last words I uttered before igniting my blade, or better yet, blades. My pupils had shrunk, and I was glaring into his once teary eyes. Now I could only see shock. "You know damn well that a hero would never run from a possible threat," he said in response, his once slightly immature gaze now being replaced with a stern and experienced glare, not even close to deterred by my extra blade, only increasing the amount of respect I had for my opponent. "Then I suppose we are at an impasse," I say as I began to twirl my my ignition stick. After a moment of momentum-building spins, I was ferociously colliding my weapon with his, cutting down walls of Crust in mere moments, whilst dodging more of his coveted shoot shields. Having to use my 2 hands in a more complex way than normal is much more fun, and much more difficult to combat or deflect, and it was clear that Crust alone was getting overwhelmed. "I'll give you this, Krusty, you've earned my respect. But I can't let you defeat me, not today." With a heavier burden than usual, I swung my blade downward twice with a twirl of the wrist, cutting down his main shield, and slashing down his chest immediately afterward, neutralizing, but not killing him. The whole time, I could have gotten up and ran away, but to run from an opponent who strived for proper justice so similarly to how I do made me want to honor this warrior with a proper battle. He soon dropped to his knees with strained breathing, barely able to look up at me anymore as I lightly pushed him down as to make it easier on him. "You fought well, Crust, you're one of the good ones." I could hear sirens quickly approaching in the distance, so I threw my chain to a faraway building, and launched toward it as swift as a bullet. Reaching a new perch on a new building, I looked back to the bridge one more time, letting out one more dry chuckle, before beginning to swing down a new street, in search of more possible enemies. Though, as he began to swing, he heard an elegant yet delicate voice shout out to him from the same height as him. The shout was from a voice he somehow remembered, and it made his heart stop as he heard the few words ring through his ears. "Nobody paw. 1. A woman with a gray fringe covering the right side of her face, and chin-length blonde hair adorned in a tight red dress is seen walking from building to building, a soft and calm expression on her clear face, her golden eyes sharp yet serene. She has been hunting for something for the past few months, a very powerful and specific something. Or better yet, someone. The name she goes by has never truly mattered to her, as she saw her actions and persona to be much more telling than simply a name, though the name she was given at birth was Ryoko, and the name she gave herself was only a revamp of the same word. This someone that she was looking for had piqued her interest, with the color he adorned in his name, and the origins of his mastery in the art of his form of justice. As she roamed about the chilly and silent streets of Japan, she could hear the pained roars of the aforementioned drunken beast, that which she didn't approach with great haste, knowing that that kind of noise would not only attract heroes, but it would also attract the one man she wanted, no, needed to find. But the one thing that got her attention the most about this man, was the color of his hair, better yet, the colors and style. It seemed so familiar in a sense. When she finally arrived, she looked down at the bridge, seeing the giant flaming corpse, a pile of deceased heroes, Kamui Woods bathing in the ocean and covered in burns, and of course the number 6 pro hero battling it out with the most capable and dangerous vigilante in recent history, who for the first time in recorded history, used a dual-bladed weapon instead of his regular single blade. After striking down Crust, and laying him down to rest for a bit, he threw his chained blade out to a close-by building, flew over, and began to swing down the street that this tall blonde woman currently resided. To keep up, the woman used her enhanced strength to run from building to building, clenching her sharpened teeth, and knowing full well that the familiarity she thought of was spot on in person. With as much force as she could muster, she shouted out to the indigo-haired, hot-headed, and concealed-faced boy that she knew for a fact was who she had been looking for so long. "Percival, slow down, Percival Pav." Within a split second of hearing her voice, I yanked myself toward the closest building to me, and skidded to a halt on the dust-encrusted roof lid. I darted my gaze out across the surrounding cityscape, the lights beginning to shut back off after the realization that the giant villain was seemingly neutralized. That voice, that damn voice, I know her fucking voice. I tried to keep a level head, tried to remain stable, but my legs were trembling as if they were about to break under the weight of the pressure. After a couple seconds of frantic glances, I finally saw her. Her hairstyle hadn't changed since then, it was still the same golden blonde, and hasn't grown much at all. It seemed like her dress got a bit tighter around the chest area, immediately catching my eye, much to my inner dismay. Ryuko fucking Tatsuma, more commonly known as Yukio, the number 9 pro hero in all of Japan, the Dragoon hero, just as gorgeous as ever. Looks like some things never change. I immediately ignited my blade again, gripping the handle firmly as I stared at who could possibly be my biggest threat to date, not just in combat, but with the fact that she just so happened to recognize me from when I was a kid. Back when Mom was still a hero. Back when I had a life. When she stared me down, I felt the overwhelming sense of dread that I could only assume was commonplace for most all of her past opponents. Yet within that sharp glare from her golden-slitted eyes, was a hint of pity and curiosity. Within all of the fear that shot through my system, there was an unending amount of irritation. "Percy, it's you, isn't it?" she called out from a separate roof, leaping to a building right next to the one I currently occupied. "Sir Percival, Knight of the Round Table. He either isn't real, or is long dead, ma'am. Hate to say, but you got the wrong guy." I attempted to deflect her pressing, but I could see in her glare softening, and that I had failed miserably. "You think that I don't recognize your voice, Percival? I helped Kana train you for 6 years, and you seriously think that you can deceive me with just a silly mask?" This was likely the first time that I felt so vulnerable. I felt like an open book, ready for the reading level of a toddler, with Ryuko having a near-genius intellect. I squinted my eyes, and took a step back to get ready to increase momentum if need be. "Percy, please, if it's you, just tell me, please." Oh, there's a third way she can be my biggest threat. The fact that she is probably the only person other than my mom that could make my heart melt, and my resolve break away with the coming wind. "Look, I'm sorry about what happened after your mom, but what you're doing isn't going to fix anything." I remained silent, knowing if I began to speak, I would likely break. She didn't mean to do what she did. She never wanted to abandon you, or leave you in anybody else's care. She loved you, and would never have wanted to see you turn out like this. All this death, this isn't justice. Do you understand that?" She spoke with no evident malice, conveying a soft and delicate tone to an equally fragile situation. Seems as though that's the common sentiment. But to make the world a better place, only looking through rose-tinted glasses, and abiding by regular lackluster laws won't save anything or anyone long-term. Having a society in which evil does not exist is simply not possible, and at some point, you just have to accept that some people need to, or deserve to be killed. We're human, it is simply impossible for a perfect, flawless society to function, or to even exist, as we were born into this world for the sole purpose to live and die in a flawed society until the heat death of existence. I am simply cleaning up the messes that nobody else is willing to acknowledge, or give aid on, and now I'm considered the villain. She gritted her teeth as I retorted, looking deflated compared to her earlier fire. Percy, if that is you behind that mask, then I want you to know that I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry, but I can't allow you to continue like this. Killing those that you simply decide are worthy will never make the change that you want it to. 5. My earlier fear was now replaced with solemn determination, as I leaned forward while bending my knees. Then it appears that we are at an impasse. I saw her head begin to contort, and her body began to grow and change, wings sprouting from her back, and her jaw enlarged to the size of a small car. I clicked my tongue in anticipation, as my godmother donned her dragon state, and began to slowly lift off the ground. Last chance, Indigo. Drop the mask and come quietly, or I will make you. Her voice boomed through every nearby alleyway, and the lights in the surrounding windows quickly began to snap back to life as the citizens in the surrounding city woke up. I was confused as to why she now called me by my alias, but I was grateful nonetheless. When I remained silent to her warning, I could immediately see her neck swelling up, and her maw opening up menacingly, before mere moments later propelling a wave of intense flame toward me, soon engulfing my figure in orange and yellow. Of course, I only absorbed the heat without even taking a first-degree burn, allowing the immense fire to fuel the condensed ball in my hands. After a few moments, she stopped. I could see that she was a bit worried, thinking I had been bested just like that, only for me to burst through the wall of fire, still holding a small ball of violet heat. I let it go, and quickly uppercutted said ball in the direction of my aunt, a beam of heat piercing through the black sky and connecting with my mother's best friend. Think of it like Issei Hyodo's dragon shot from HSDXD distorted. She roared in agony, recoiling backward as her wings flapped away whatever fire she could, nullifying my attack even though she took substantial damage. Taking advantage of her distraction, I darted toward her neck, fire engulfing my knuckles and fist as I collided with her scaly exterior, earning a spit-up of saliva. I scaled the side of her neck with my kunai, eventually reaching her forehead, that which I ignited a blade to kill her off. Yet as I held the knockoff lightsaber in my hand, I glanced down at my godmother, seeing the pain in her eyes. I couldn't bring myself to kill her. I didn't even try, I just knew that I couldn't. During my moment of docility, she was able to shake me off, and quickly went back to her original size, realizing that I had an advantage when she was larger. You could have killed me, you had the chance twice now, so why didn't you take it? She taunted wearily, as she rushed toward me on foot, eventually finding her foot connecting with my left forearm, and her fist colliding with my face. I thought that you were a killer. A monster, a maniac, the Violet Phoenix. Where's the fire, Percival? At hearing my name, I finally could withstand it no longer, and after withstanding her barrage, I gut-punched her, and swept her legs in quick succession. Whilst she was on the ground, I forced her head down, and stabbed my newly ignited blade into her right thigh, making sure not to do permanent damage. As she screamed in agony once more, I brought my face down to her level. Is this enough fire for ya? She elbowed me in the jaw, and tossed me aside, urging me to use my kunai to stop, and yank myself back in her direction for a heavy sucker punch, infused with a detonation ball I held in my palm. As she slumped down, I quickly realized many things. 1. I was finally able to beat my old sensei and godmother. Albeit, after a decade of absence, but the little details matter not. 2. Even if I can defeat my godmother, no matter how much I tell myself that I have to, I still can't bring myself to kill her. Her dress was tattered from the explosive blow she had just received, and she was attempting to force herself to get up, only making me feel worse. What are you waiting for? You can kill me at any time. Her reluctance to concede defeat, or to go without having been killed truly impressed me, no matter how painful it was. She glared into my eyes reclusively, clearly resigned to her fate, yet refusing to back off. I lifted my palm up, even though I knew I wouldn't be able to send any more attacks her way even if I wanted to. As the sun began to rise above the horizon, and the lights inside the windows remained on, solely due to the fact that getting more sleep would now mean nothing, I was sure that I had heard a gunshot a few blocks away. Ryukyu seemingly flinched as well, but I was more focused on the noise itself, quickly leaving my prey to go for a new predator, swinging by my chain and launching at sound speed. Ryukyu Pav. Why? Am I not dead? I was bested. No, I was eviscerated completely. So why did he decide not to eliminate me? No, that's not what matters right now. What the hell was that bang? Well, obviously it was a gun, but why and where? I couldn't get these thoughts to shut up, and I knew full well that I was injured, but I had to uphold my job, despite the guilt I felt panging on my heart. Was that really not Percy? I mean, he looks just like him, and has such ferocity, but I also know that he wouldn't have hesitated to kill me if given the chance. I forced myself to sprout smaller wings from my back, and began to fly as fast as I could in the direction that I could now hear commotion, and more brand new screams, some guttural, some fearful, all miserable. When my scales picked up on the sounds within a very specific alleyway, I quickly saw the disembodied arm lying on the ground next to a vacant pistol. 3. A woman ran out of the shadows, her clothing torn, tears streaming down her face, and her side bleeding profusely. She tripped and fell into my arms, screaming in pain and fear, as I tried to calm her down. Ma'am, you're okay, you're all right, you're safe. Just calm the hell down, and breathe in through your nostrils, and out through your mouth, okay? I spoke stern yet gently, attempting to get through the obviously petrified girl, even though the screams hadn't stopped. The woman began to slow her breath, slowly, but surely, and I rubbed her shoulders therapeutically. Moments later, the screams stopped abruptly. I could see the piercing violet eyes of my previous opponent, but more importantly, I got a good look at the eyes I recognized as my nephew's. Listen, you need to seek the police, or a hero of better health at this moment, immediately. Go, I told the speechless victim, causing her to begin to run as fast as her injuries would allow her. I snapped my gaze back to the young vigilante, the thing that my nephew thinks he has become. But I knew the more I looked at him that he was behind that mask. I fucking knew it, I'll admit it, even though you are freaky to look at when you do, whatever you're doing right now, but you do good work, and you save a lot of people. Though your methods disturb me, it's clear that your heart is in the right place. Just, please, tell me it's you. Tell me that your reasons are what I think they are. Please, just give me a bit of closure, if any. He stood silently under the shadow of the alleyway, simply staring into my soul briefly, not with malice, nor with anger. He let out a heavy sigh. You always were perceptive, auntie. He spoke as he stepped into the light of the morning sun, having already removed his mask, much to my surprise. He looked great for his age, and had the most uncharacteristically warm smile adorning his lightened face. Before I could even think about anything, I just started to sob. I was terrified for almost a decade. I had promised Kana that I would protect him from anything, but when Enji got custody, I felt as if I had failed. When he was reported missing, I found myself halting my prison visits with Kana. Ever since, it has been my mission to be sure that he was safe, one way or another. As I closed my eyes as tight as I could, I felt a pair of warm arms wrap me up in a tender embrace, seemingly releasing warmth regularly. After all these years, he has only gotten stronger, to the point of me being nearly obsolete. I clenched my fists tightly, grasping at his hood and back, seeking comfort in my moment of absolute weakness. You're a bit more of a crybaby than I remembered, auntie. What changed since I've been gone? He mused somberly as he rubbed soothing circles across my back. You did, I responded in a strained manner, causing him to slightly flinch and tighten his grip slightly. Why did you run? Why did you take this path? You know that this isn't what your mom would want, so I ran because I knew that this is what I wanted to do. His response shocked me to my core, and confused me more than I could fathom. But why? Why would you ever want to be a killer, to combat the very group that your mother and I have sworn allegiance to, and to force the world to hate you? Just why? He pulled away from me after a moment of silence, his gaze piercing my soul. Because I learned back with my sperm donor, that not all heroes are good people. Not by a fucking long shot. He spoke with a harsh scowl, glancing away from me briefly. What did he do? Tell me. He didn't look back to me for a few seconds, looking at the ground with clear grievance. He broke my stepmom, forced my oldest stepbrother to almost take his life, Made my older stepbrother hate everything, beat the ever-loving Christ out of me and Shoto, and Fuyumi. He was seething, his fists clenched, and the aura of his heat beginning to exponentially increase by the second in temperature. I quickly grabbed his hands, signaling for him to know that he was okay, and the heat began to die down. It's okay. We don't have to talk about what happened with her, if it's too much for you. He nodded slowly, looking back at the ground all over again. I guess that both of us haven't been having the best of luck, huh? I quipped, trying to lighten the mood. You became a top 10 heroine in Japan, and one of the most respectable heroes on the planet in the span of 8 years, while I successfully got the Japanese Hero Society and the police to despise me in their entirety in the span of 4. Wow, you certainly did have it rough. He spoke sarcastically. The snarky tone I remember oh too well from when he was 10 was clear to hear. When you put it like that, I guess you aren't wrong. But that doesn't mean that I'm always feeling right as rain, you know. He shrugged and nodded as I responded, taking a couple steps away as our hands parted. Let me help you. Let me give you a semi-normal life again, please. I pleaded desperately with my nephew, only to be met by his backside. I don't want a normal life. That chance I had is long gone. I want to be the one to save those who are about to have their normal life taken, one way or another. I'm far from done yet. I let out a heavy sigh of stress mixed with relief, knowing that at least his stubbornness hasn't changed a bit. If you are truly set in your ways, then I'm afraid I won't be able to convince you otherwise. He instinctively put his hand on his lightsaber thingy from before, but I kept speaking. If you won't let me help you get better, then I can only try to help you do better. He flinched in seemingly surprise, and his eyes fluttered in confusion. I've got way too much space in my current home for just one woman, so why not seek some refuge for a while? I know that the question I asked goes against the code of heroes practically across the globe, but I'm not going to lose my nephew again. I know he is doing good things and I want to help him any way I can. Even if it means betraying the law a single time, I will do it if it means he can do better. Percival Pav. Her offer threw me for a loop. A top 10 pro heroine, offering Japan's most feared vigilante a place to stay seemed like taboo, but from the look in her eye, I could tell that my aunt was dead serious. She was never the type to look upon people like me with rose-tinted glasses, but if she could truly see the benefit of keeping me safe, then I saw no reason to refuse. This could also make me seem far less suspicious at UA, as I will finally have a guardian figure, who just so happens to be a top 10 heroine, damn it. That kind of attention would be the death of me, it would fry me like a steak. Looks like I have yet another thing to hide from the world. Not like it's much of an issue, I just wish that my mind could rest. Alright, I suppose I could use a place to Santa. Before I could finish speaking, I was grabbed up into a bear hug, and nearly had the life squeezed out of me. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. She began to chant softly as she twisted her torso around while she wrung my breath. She is a gentle soul, and a loving person, but can be kinda careless whenever she's jovial or enraged. I patted her back a couple times, as a way to tap out and get her attention, causing her to eventually let me go. Sorry, I was just very happy, that's all. She exclaimed with a small smile, as I focused on rubbing my back as I regenerated my now cracked spine. All's good, Auntie. I'm feeling quite alright myself. I say as I move my back a bit, only to hear it crack a bit more. Here's my address. You can come drop off your belongings whenever you wish, the window will be open for you. She said as she handed me a small piece of paper that which had her address. Thanks, I hope you know how much this means, not only to me, but for my schooling, and you know what, this means a lot. She only smiled warmly in return, and gave me a nod. You won't stop even if I begged on my knees, so I guess I'll just have to be sure that you don't push yourself too hard. I promise, this time, I won't mess up on the whole godmother thing. She proclaimed with a gentle smile, and contradictory fire in her sharpened gaze. She turned to leave, but there were two things that I had to get off my mind. For the record, you never once messed up as my godmother, you had your chance forcefully taken from you by the emblazoned bastard that is my sperm donor, and that was not your fucking fault. I started calmly, but clearly, I put in a bit more energy than I had originally planned. She stopped dead in her tracks, and looked back with a surprised expression, but I still wasn't done. Wow, that means a lot to hear, Percy. Yeah, oh yeah, I don't know if you've noticed, but your dress is kinda tattered, and there isn't a bra, so, sorry. I spoke in slow intervals, before latching my chain to a nearby building, and yanking myself away before she registered what I had said. Ryukyu Pav, slight NSFW warning. As he spoke, I began to look down at my damaged dress from when we had fought, and couldn't help but notice one of my breasts slightly revealed, and suddenly felt the cool dawn air dance across my supple skin. I couldn't form any real words, as I realized I had just been hugging him while pressing my bare breast against him the whole time. I blushed brightly as he swung away in a flustered stupor, but couldn't help but chuckle at how distracted I was at seeing my nephew. I sprouted my wings finally, and took to the sky, covering my breast, and looking forward to the new chance I have been given. Izuku Pav, Percival, report on your happenings during your patrol. I requested firmly through my phone to my partner in Cree Justice. Partner in Justice. Beat the shit out of Crust, Kamui Woods, and a couple other low lives. I saved around 34 different people from muggings and rape cases. It is disturbing how even while someone known as a certified rapist killer, who can mop the floor with most heroes with ease, is on the prowl, they still decide to waste themselves on such disgusting endeavors. I couldn't help but agree with that last part. It was saddening to see the fact that degenerate urges can often trump common sense and fear in the long run. It often makes me lose faith in humanity, but that doesn't mean I'm gonna be quitting. On that, we can agree. Anything else worth mentioning other than the usual? He paused for a bit, as if trying to remember something, or decide on whether or not to say something. Nope, nothing really interesting at the end of the day. His demeanor had hardly changed, as if the pause hadn't meant a thing. Alright, well, I bid you safe travels, Percy. I attempt to wrap up our conversation respectfully. Do you really need to talk like you're in a 70s Christmas romantic movie? Geez, I am shocked that I am older than you. He quipped cockily, earning a scoff from me. I simply enjoy using uncommon words. I apologize that your vocabulary is so limited. I quipped in response. Trust me, I could speak with big uncommon words if I wanted. I'm simply a straight-to-the-point kind of guy. He spoke with a chuckle. Whatever you say, Percy, have a good night. I spoke while shaking my head. Good night. He hung up quickly after his response, as per usual, and I hung up shortly after. I walked through a white door frame, leading into my bedroom, finding my mother, Mitsuki, and Colin laying in my bed peacefully, snoozing away in the night, small smiles on each of their faces. How the hell did I end up like this? I slowly walked out of my room, and went to grab myself a glass of water in the kitchen. Whilst I poured water into a glass I had grabbed from the cupboard, I began to hear the phone ring closer to the porch. I answered the call, and put the phone to my ear. Hello, is this the Midoriya residence? Yep, this is Izuku Midoriya talking. Ah, just who I was hoping to talk to. Oh, you wish to converse with me. Why is that? You see, there was a slight error within our ranking systems. I do apologize for that. I was confused about who I was talking to, and what they were yammering about. Ranking. Why, the UA entrance exam scores, of course. I froze. One of our staff members attempted to reduce your score, but fortunately, we saw the footage, and I am proud to welcome someone as talented as you into UA High. I was dead silent. This wasn't something I accounted for, and I was furious. Zero has barely even introduced himself to criminals, let alone the world, and he is already being shown the door. 4. No. Lelouch was able to continue what he does while being stalked by an entire government force on a daily basis, having his memory removed, and being an ace student. If Zero could handle it then, he can handle it now. Thank you so much for the great news. 2. Can't wait to tell my mom. I quickly hung up before he could continue, a smirk spreading across my lips. A light chuckle escaped my maw as I picked back up my glass of water, and turned toward my room again. Looks like things just got a bit more interesting. Nezu Pav. Hours before the phone call from last chapter. I sat silently in my seat as per usual, sighing on occasion as I waited for work of any kind, already having burned through any meaningless paperwork was necessary. I had a feeling that something interesting was going to happen today, not a bad interesting, but a good one. I have a knack for seeing possibilities in people and things off of first glance, and I simply just knew the moment I saw a boy with a rather hideous head of round purple hair on his head. Well, apparently, my predictions were on point as always, as Eraserhead pushed open my door without permission. "Good evening, Aizawa. I'm assuming you have some news on our future students?" I asked preemptively, just having a slight hunch that I was correct. "You need to stop reading minds, sir, it scares people," he responded dryly, slapping down what appeared to be a police report. "The kid with those balls on his head, the short stack. Remember him?" "Yeah. Well, apparently he was just caught peeping into a public women's restroom, snapping pictures, upskirts, the whole shebang. The kid's a degenerate piece of shit." He spoke with a bit more anger, but maintained his usual cold tone. We both remained silent for a few moments, before I quickly realized what this meant. "Yes, that is quite a disappointment, but do you remember the deal we made with Vlad?" I saw his eyes light up briefly, remembering the student genius who piloted the Gloucester, and got the highest score without a quirk. How he commanded the remote-piloted robots is beyond me to this day. "I don't care what you say, he is in my class, and that's final," he said abruptly, spinning on his heel, and going to take his leave. "Don't go too hard on him now, Shota," I called after him with a chuckle. "No promises," he called back with a surprising amount of enthusiasm. I think that this child just woke up a new level of sadism within him the day he showed us what skill truly is. I knew for a fact that Vlad would start a screaming match with me if I brought this up so soon, so I simply decided to update the student registry forums and remove the Mineta boy from the roster. I quickly added in the Viridian-haired ace, and reached for my phone. It was late, and I was worried that he wouldn't answer, but I knew I simply had to. I dialed his number, hit call, and only mere moments of ringing later, I heard a click. "Hello, Izuku Midoriya, I will make a genius of you yet." Izuku Pav. 2 weeks later. They weren't kidding when they said that I would get my uniform quickly. I usually get packages months too late. The condition is incredible. The fabric is so comfortable I could die happy. "Izuku, you're mumbling again." I slapped my mouth shut, realizing that my thoughts had escaped through my mouth. You should try just, talking normally." He suggests smugly. "Screw you, it's not that easy. It's just a habit, that's all." I replied quietly. "You talk like an addict. Next thing you're gonna say is, I can quit at any time, yeah." I looked down at the floor of my room, unable to hide the slight smirk bedecking my face. I was right, wasn't I? I questioned me with while squinting his eyes in a suggestive manner, causing me to bust out into a chuckle at how predictable I can be. "Piss off, Percy, I can't help it. I fucking knew it, man, I fucking knew it," he exclaimed proudly, hopping to his feet and thrusting his arms upward in an exaggerated manner. Our laughter lured Mom to my room thanks to the commotion, and she pushed open my door slowly. "I'm assuming that the two of you haven't been having that bad of a time so far, would I be safe in assuming that?" she asked jokingly, earning a grin from me, and a nod from Percy. "I'll admit it's cozy in here," Percy replied with a small sigh, acting as if that was hard to say. "1. Shouldn't you be at home getting supplies ready for your schooling? Now that I think about it, where are you going for your schooling?" Mom asked curiously, earning a cautious glance from me. Hi as well, general studies rather than heroics. Not really my style. That response seemed to do the trick, as Mom nodded in understanding. "I heard that there's a great gym over there, so that's really the main reason as to why I'm heading there, other than their great education and all that," he raved on, sparkles in his usually dim eyes as he seemingly began to fantasize about what the new gym would be like. I had brought him to the one I had been trained in initially, but he was rather unamused for the most part. "Well, I hope you do well in UA, Percival. You may not have been around long, but I know you are a good influence on my son, and myself. I'm sure your parents are proud." I saw a tick mark appear on his forehead, clearly displaying slight agitation. "Thanks," he responded dryly, clearly trying not to get upset with what was meant to be a kind gesture. "Well, I should probably let you two get back to whatever you were doing earlier, happy chatting." She spoke warmly as she shut the door behind her while leaving. I looked to Percy, trying to see what he was feeling. Quote. Calling me a good influence, huh? He spoke sarcastically, as we both knew that we were not going to be good role models forever. She always sees the best in people, sometimes to her own detriment. I guess that's partially where I got my quote-unquote hero complex. I spoke slowly, deep in thought. You got a hero complex because you hate seeing innocent people getting hurt. Whether you got it from your mom or yourself, it is still a heartwarming trait. Don't forget that. I nodded toward him, and looked back down at my new UA uniform. We'll have to be much more careful when it comes to our communication. First things first, locate all cameras, and try to find places where conversation is possible. Percy glanced toward me with amusement. I would have expected you to just go full hero, but I guess you've made up your mind. Yeah, I did. I made it up the moment I put on the mask. Zero isn't staying dead, and he isn't bowing to oppression before he can even make his big entrance. Quote. Izuku, you're mumbling again. I glanced back toward my partner in crime slowly. You could almost hear my neck creaking like an old door. Quote. Sorry. He just began to chuckle at my expense for a while, as I went back to assessing my uniform. Tomorrow is our first day in UA. Normally, I'd be scared of the new classes and faces, but there is only one thing I'm afraid of right now. Getting caught early. Percival Pav. The next day, I had about 5 hours before my first day at UA would begin, so I made the decision to use what little time I had left to the fullest, bringing what little belongings I had on my person to Auntie Ryuko's apartment before I could let the stress overwhelm me. Me and Izuku have both arranged to come in at different times, and maintain relatively strained contact for a couple days, as to be sure that our acquaintanceship seems much more new compared to an already pre-existing friendship from outside of school. Incredibly precautious, I know, but Zero is a man of mystery, not an open book. I scaled the side of her apartment complex under a bright dawn sun, everyone in the building either at work already or fast asleep. I found the window that I suspected to be the living quarters of my godmother and silently opened the window. Noticing her still fast asleep in her room with my heat seeker, so I remained silent as not to wake her up, setting my tattered blanket, toothbrush, package of CDs and records, last pack of cigarettes, don't ask, and my casual hoodie and clothes all in a bag on the living room couch. Lastly, I took off my mask, and went into her lavish bathroom, shaving what little stubble that may remain on my face thanks to my frequent neglect, and washed off the excess without uttering a word. Of course the final course of action was to dye my hair. I popped my earphones back into my ears, and scrolled through my music catalog, found a song I liked that seemed to fit the vibe, and pressed play. I took out my package of black hair dye, and began to get to work over the next hour, my ability to dry the dye in the water with my heat thankfully speeding up the process immensely. I again washed away the excess, and looked into the mirror, seeing a completely different person as per usual, but the blank expression that I can't seem to shake off on my own remained. I went to my backpack, and began to change into my new uniform, hating the feeling of the unfamiliar fabric, as I expected I would. Nevertheless, I slung my backpack back over my shoulder, and left the same way I came, silently through the window. I ran from roof to roof for a while, until I soon saw an array of different students with the same uniform as me, all with different shapes and sizes. I skidded a wall into an alley with my spearhead, and simply entered the large pack of students. Not a single one of them noticed my sudden appearance. At least now I know who's fodder, and who isn't. Moments of walking later, I quickly noticed Izuku in the crowd, obviously nervous. Compared to the original Zero, he is vastly different. I just have to hope that his obsession with being him won't get him caught. As long as he survives, the mission survives, and that is all that counts. Soon enough, the huge blue building arrived in my crosshairs, earning a determined scowl out of me as I could hear a loud audible gulp from the Viridian-haired bozo. No matter how much he denies it, his dream was to come here once. His mental blocks are nowhere near as strong as he thinks they are. I continued listening to the song as I walked down the sidewalk as casually as possible, not making conversation with anyone, glaring at the UA logo. Izuku Pav. Holy hell, I'm actually here. The school of elites. I, a quirkless kid, actually got in WH. What the hell am I thinking? This is just for public perception, nothing more. Nothing cooler at all. This is the building housing possible enemies. I need to be much more careful than this. Wait a minute, am I mumbling again? I quickly checked to see if I was mumbling, seeing some people staring at me in confusion, thankfully not understanding what I had said. I let out a peep of embarrassment, a sigh of relief, forced my head down, and continued walking through the gates of UA nervously, feeling Percy's presence close behind me, glaring at me with either annoyance or amusement. Even though it was the same sun, the world seemed so much brighter when around this building, as if nothing could go wrong, even though I knew that wasn't the case. I simply continued walking forward, unable to keep a smile off my face. Percy dipped off to the side once we entered the glass building, going down a flight of stairs to the general studies section while I went up another to find the Year 1 hero course. Yet as I had anticipated, I found no such room as 1A, and stumbled around like a lost kitten for 4 straight minutes, as everyone found where they were supposed to go quite easily. Eventually, after another 3 minutes of searching, I finally found a first-year hero course classroom. I took up an empty seat after opening the door, and looked up at the front board, only to meet the immediate rage-filled glare of a man dressed in red. Quickly I shot up from my seat, quietly scooted over to the door and reread the sign. Class 1B. I slapped myself on the forehead in embarrassment and annoyance. Old habits die hard. Sorry sir, I thought that this was 1A. I exclaimed guiltily, my confusion of his immense anger somewhat confusing me. Oh, 1A. Down the hall and take a left, it's the second room to the right. A girl with sharp teeth and deep viridian hair, similar to my own, called from her seat at the window, her arm simply popping off of her body, hovering over to my side as I stood dumbfounded, only for the hand to point in the direction of my homeroom. Thank you, Tokage, Setsuna Tokage, she exclaimed passionately, the hand hovering in front of me going for a handshake, to which I cautiously accepted. This thing isn't my mouth, it doesn't bite, little man, unless you want it to, she purred provocatively, as her hand quickly began caressing my forearm out of nowhere, earning a tomato-red blush. Just kidding, man, your reactions are adorable little buddy. The hand gave me a quick pat on the head as I stood frozen in shock. You should get to class before Vlad's blood really gets boiling, she recommended, bringing her hand back to her arm in one swift second, as I nodded and slowly turned to begin walking. I could practically hear my arms creaking like a tree getting bent out of shape as I tried to get the images that my mind was playing during that whole moment out of my mind. I finally saw the classroom of 1A, for real this time, and finally made my way to the door. Hey, I heard someone call out to me from across the hall. I looked down the hall, and saw a huge, human-sized yellow caterpillar slumped over on the floor, with the face of a sleep-deprived man glaring at me. I normally would have yelled at a sight like this, but I stared in silence for a couple seconds as he started scooting closer. You're that whiz kid, from the entrance exam, aren't you? The caterpillar began to open up, unzipping to reveal a man dressed in all black, a long gray scarf on his shoulders. See, this is why I waited. Whiz kid, I personally wouldn't call myself that, you, just shut up and open the door kid. After having been shut down so brutally, I swallowed my words and slid open the door, revealing a sea of multiple different hair colors. I could see red hair, navy blue hair, chocolate brown, forest green, hot pink, ash blonde, more forest green, white and red. There was such a variety, and everyone seemed so lively. Wait a minute, the two before the last one seem oddly familiar. Oh yeah, Sister Dearest, and Bakugo exist, kinda forgot about them for a bit. Deku, what the hell are you doing here you dirty bastard? Izumi yelled from across the room, sparking the attention of everyone in the room and causing the man behind me to groan in annoyance. You know them? He asked begrudgingly. Sadly, I replied begrudgingly. Don't fucking ignore Izumi, quirkless bastard. Bakugo barked aimlessly, lunging from his seat at rock speed, and attempting to throw his signature right hook, only for me to duck and flip him over my shoulder. Could we please save the banter for after school? I'm in no mood for your incessant yammering. I pleaded before watching Izumi, blinded by anger, rushing toward me instead of just grabbing me with telekinesis. I weaved to the side, before locking eyes with both of them. Will the two of you kindly fuck off? I could almost feel their brains contort and change at my command, and I could just barely see red rings around their eyes. TCH, fine. Bakugo scoffed begrudgingly, trudging back to his seat along with Izumi, clearly leaving the others baffled. I pinched the bridge of my nose, knowing damn well people would be confused about a quirkless kid who was that good at manipulation, by doing literally nothing. But knowing people like UA students, they will likely ignore the warning signs, as the unknown is the norm. Almost any explanation would do the trick. When I opened my eyes again, I immediately noticed the wide smile of the girl with rosy cheeks from the entrance exam. She gave me a small wave that which I returned gladly, as I walked over to the empty seat next to hers. "I'm glad you could make it, Midoriya," she whispered under her breath, leaning her head to the side as her eyes closed while she smiled. "Likewise," I replied with my own smile, as I snapped my head back to look at the front of the room, the man dressed in black already standing in front of the whiteboard, proving my theory of his role to be correct. "Good morning, class, and welcome to your first class of the Year 1 Hero course. It's obvious that at least some of you are capable considering that you got accepted in the first place, so you'd better not prove me wrong and suck ass. I am your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa, but you can simply refer to me as Mr. Aizawa. Are there any questions before we begin?" His monotone explanation of a course that many consider to be esteemed was shocking to say the least, but there was a much more pressing matter cluttering my mind. I raised my hand without thinking. "Yes, Midoriya." I was shocked that he already knew my name, but him also recognizing me from the exam was telling me enough. "I mean, no offense, but are you okay? I mean, you look dead tired. Are you sure you are in good condition? Are you trying to get out of classes on your first day? Really?" His remark made me realize how rude I sounded. "No, not at all. Was just worried, that's all," I sputtered nervously, waving my hands around frantically. "Thank you for the concern, but I am the last thing you should be concerned about. Worry about yourself, problem child." "Great, now I already have a label." "All right. Take one of the uniforms from the front desk, get changed in the changing rooms, and meet me out on the training grounds in 8 minutes. Don't you dare keep me waiting." He turned away from the class, and began to walk down the hall to the exit, as all of us gathered our wills, and went to the changing rooms after picking up our uniforms. I could already feel 3 hateful glares stabbing me in the back. I knew where 2 came from, and have a hunch that jet lag over there is holding an eensy-weensy itty-bitty little grudge from the exam. I went into one of the stalls in the changing room so that nobody would question my scars. It is simply a topic that would start okay, and possibly end in a breakdown. I was done in 5 minutes, and had to sprint to make it to roll call. First day, and I'm already nervous. What a wonderful world. Izumi, a raven-haired girl, and a guy with shiny blonde hair were late, the latter especially. "What the hell did you get from? Don't you dare keep me waiting, make me wait even longer? Hurry the hell up next time." I could see Mr. Aizawa holding onto a ball, and tossing it in the air occasionally, and a big screen behind him that displayed not only my name, but a lot of other ones, including Uraraka. "I'm guessing that you all are curious about this ball and the screen? Well, fuck my monologue, I guess. 1. Today, you all will be participating in regulated physical tests that will test your quirk's current limitations, as well as your regular limits. No matter how powerful our quirk is, we are all only human. A well-placed bullet, blade, heart attack, drug, many things could kill almost all of us. We need to learn your limits, so that we can help you grow, and expand your variety of abilities to new heights and mediums. Starting with a regular ball throw. The harder and higher you throw it, the higher your score will be. You have to stay in this circle while throwing, and the ball itself will calculate your score." I narrowed my gaze on the ball, a bit worried that my lack of a quirk might put me at a disadvantage, but more than confident in my physique. "Midoriya, I know you don't have a quirk, but you found a way to get first place somehow, so why don't you show us your actual physical strength?" He threw me a fast ball which I caught, and I let out a deep sigh. Before I could even take a step, the preppy kid chimed in. "Mr. Aizawa, I must know, why in God's name did you allow a quirkless individual into the hero course? He is intelligent, that has been proven, but are we sure that we'll be able to prosper here?" Immediately, my blood began to boil. "Though your reasoning is flawed, you are slightly correct. I can't just let any of you stay here without knowing what you can do under pressure, so here's the deal. Last place goes home, and doesn't come back, no questions asked." Everyone gasped, and began complaining quite verbally, saying things like, "Ooh, it's not FAIRRR," or, "What did we do?" whilst I silently festered in my anger. I clenched my teeth, and got fed up with the words Jetlag had uttered more than the threat of going home, marching forward with a visible scowl, stepping into the assigned circle, taking my stance before anyone could continue yammering, and threw the ball as hard as I could into the sky. It was nothing compared to something that Bakugo or Izumi could do, but for a man with no extra powers, it was incredibly impressive to say the least. Boo fucking who, I was born without a mutation, too fucking bad. All of you have one, and here you are yapping and yapping and yapping about how unfair the world is, while there are women and children getting taken off the streets, or assaulted, or worse. We are meant to be heroes as to alleviate that stress for the common people that we will have to feel no matter what. If you don't get that, then you don't deserve your quirks, or your place in a school such as this one. I ranted angrily, not entirely understanding where my anger was coming from. I was given the score of 258.36, vastly above average. Alright, not bad at all. Please get back in line, while the others participate. Aizawa requested as I nodded slowly, and got back in line, getting a pat on the back from Uraraka, earning a strained smile from my lips. A lot of people got worse scores than me, which was reassuring, but when I saw Uraraka get infinity, and Izumi do the same, my ego kinda just deflated all over again. Bakugo getting the highest natural score was bound to happen, but him screaming, "DIEE," was kinda funny for what it was. The grip test was pretty well in my favor, as not many people put in as much effort to match both Colin Kazuki and Suzaku Kurorugi, earning me third place behind the guy with 6 arms, and a boy with big lips and even bigger muscles who each got first and second respectively, while Izumi couldn't grip harder than me somehow, even though she had All Might himself in her corner for over a decade. For 50 meters foot races, I went up against the pink-skinned girl from the entrance exam, who looked quite athletic, having gotten 6th on grip strength behind a boy with spiky red hair. She was quick while skating on her acid, but I was able to maintain pace while she struggled slightly on balance, allowing me to beat her by 0.83 seconds. Phew. I thought I was faster than that, she muttered sadly, causing me to put a hand on her shoulder. No worries, you simply need to work on straight lines. In the entrance exam, you were zigzagging a whole lot, and though it was helpful then, straight lines are great for agility and momentum building. She put her hand to her chin, and thought for a moment. I guess I've got a lot to work on. Thanks for the tip, she exclaimed energetically, pumping her fists excitedly. I'm Mina Ishido, by the way. It's a pleasure to finally properly meet you. She took my hand, and shook it happily, before splitting off and skipping her way toward Ochako and a girl with short dark purple hair, and tendrils coming off her earlobes. The stamina long-distance run test went well enough. A girl named Momo Yaoyorozu apparently just made a damn bike, and cheesed her way through the test, earning me 2nd place. The long-distance jump, I did better than most without physical quirks, but got body-chucked by those who could propel themselves forward, like Izumi, the guy with candy cane hair, or Bakugo. I think for the first time in this whole thing, I got 1st place during the sit-up session, as even Bakugo was groaning halfway through my set. Nobody did especially well at the seated toe touch except for Mina, so she quickly got 1st in that regard. Sidesteps were relatively easy for me, but it wasn't like I was doing exceptionally well or anything, considering I got 3rd behind the likes of Bakugo and Mina. I was already panting from physical stress, and now it was time to see if I was going home or not. I began to slightly hyperventilate before steadying my breathing. I guess my adrenaline has worn off finally. I guess I'm not as strong as I thought. Congratulations on getting through your first fitness test. You all did pretty well, all things considered. But of course, in tests like these, you've gotta weed out the weak, yeah? Aizawa mused sarcastically, as he pulled up all of our results on the screen, revealing all 20 of our names at once. I skimmed down the list from the top, thankfully finding myself at a comfortable 4th place, Bakugo getting 6th, Izumi getting 5th, and this Todoroki guy, who I'm assuming is the kid with candy cane hair, got 2nd. 1st place went to a girl named Momo Yaoyorozu, and with Ishido and Uraraka thankfully ranking at 8 and 9 respectively, with this Kirishima kid coming from behind and getting 3rd. 7-1. Momo Yaoyorozu 2, Shoto Todoroki 3, Eijiru Kirishima 4. Izuku Midoriya 5, Izumi Yagi 6, Katsuki Bakugo 7. Meso Shoji 8, Mina Ishido 9, Ochako Uraraka 10, Rikido Sato 11, Tenya Iida 12, Fumikage Tokiyami 13, Mashirao Ojiro 14, Tsuyu Asui 15, Kyoka Jiro 16, Honta Siro 17, Denki Kaminari 18, Toru Hagakure 19, Yuga Aoyama 20, Koji Koda. I felt at ease knowing that my spot was safe, and also felt light on the air when I saw Bakugo and Izumi seething as they saw I beat them, but for whoever that Koji kid was, his opportunity was just stripped away. Oh yeah, funny story, none of you are getting expelled. Insert a cricket noise, and you will get a clear view of what we were all thinking and doing. What the hell do you mean we aren't getting expelled? He simply took on a goofy grin, and glared at us with sadistic glee. I would have thought it was obvious to you all. You're telling me that none of you got the memo? I simply clicked my tongue in annoyance. If the research I put into this place isn't false, then this man once expelled an entire first-year class just because they were slackers. I honestly think that what he is trying to say is that he thinks we all did well enough to keep him happy. Be grateful you actually put in some effort, or you might have ended up like the class of 2055. Aizawa stopped grinning once I pointed that out, and everyone stopped ranting out of the sheer shock factor. How much more do you know, huh kid? He asked much more curiously than before, taking on a slightly different grin. I know that you're Eraserhead, the erasure hero for one. I know you are in the top 10 heroes with the least publicity, and I also know that there is a certain oaf over there stalking us. I say, pointing toward the goofy little goober himself, All Might peeking around the corner of the building, likely to make sure Aizawa didn't pull anything funny on Izumi. The fact that he likely couldn't give any less of a fuck about me hurts a bit, since this is the first I've seen of him other than on the news, but I've gotten used to it. Aizawa simply glared at All Might with disdain, as he slowly scoots away, like a child who had just been told no. Everyone in class was shocked to see this kind of behavior from the number one hero, but he is still an imperfect human with flaws on top of flaws, as everyone will definitely learn in time. Alright. You clearly did your homework, kid. It's rare for me to be impressed. He mused with a dull tone. I can tell. I replied with a slight bit of sass, immediately urging me to bow in apology. Why the hell are you apologizing? You're just speaking your mind. As long as you keep it relatively tame, all is good. His reassurance was, shocker, reassuring. As I was lifting my head to thank him, I heard loads of loud explosions approaching quickly, and the roar of a certain Pomeranian. Let's see you dodge this, Deku. I leapt backward to dodge his lunge relatively easily, only to seconds later have to dodge yet another right hook. I didn't want to use my Geass on him twice already and waste it for the month, so I weaved to the side, and got him in the temple with a palm strike. Before he could get back up from the surprisingly staggering attack I threw, he was quickly caught by the alloy scarf of our teacher. I got that you were egotistical and all that when I saw you bragging earlier, but you're seriously this much of a piece of work? Really? I've got dry eye, so knock it off already. I nodded my head quickly while Bakugo barked loudly while trying to use his quirk. I went back to my place on the white line, everyone else following suit in time, even Bakugo once he was eventually released. Alright class, you all can just head to the changing rooms, pack up your shit, grab a pamphlet from the front of the room, and hoof it out of here. I've got some shitty rom-coms to catch up on, and a nap to have. If you have any questions after I'm asleep, too bad, he remarked coldly, turning around to walk back to the classroom. 3 after I had changed, and went to grab my pamphlet, I caught a quick glimpse of Percy taking his leave as well along with other general studies students. I guess we all got early dismissals. I grabbed up a pamphlet, picked up my book bag, and quickly began to jog down the hall so that I could leave too. I got a text from Percy as I got out the door, prompting me to open my phone. Percy and Izuku's chatroom. Percy. I'm going out again tonight, if you plan to as well, just don't be surprised. You. Bet, good luck Percy. How strong are they? You. Quite. Percy. Percy. Was there anyone with purple hair? You. Looking for siblings? There was one, but it wasn't your hair color at all. Percy. Not looking for siblings, was just curious. Percy. I mean, since when was having natural green or purple hair meant to be normal? You. You have the power to potentially absorb the sun someday. You. And you are worried about the normalcy of hair color? Percy. Yes. Yes, I am Izuku Pav. I shut off my phone with a chuckle, continuing my walk back home in silence. Eventually, I reached into my pocket and popped my earphones in, putting on a song I thought just fit the setting, allowing the nostalgia of the series that whence it came to flow freely in my mind. Putting my arms around my head, I could faintly hear the sound of approaching footsteps. I turned around and found Ochako jogging toward me. "Hey Deku. I'm happy you got such a high score," she cheered enthusiastically, pumping her fists into the air. I was going to tell her what Deku meant, but I decided to keep it to myself, seeing as she already seemed to like the nickname. "Thanks, you getting infinity was awesome as well." She beamed at the compliment, putting her hands behind her back as we began to walk together. Eventually we parted ways, and I went down the path to my home. Along the way, I spotted the convenience store where it all began. Deciding that it had been too long since I had seen Lelouch, Suzaku, or Cici, I decided to pay them a visit. As I opened the door to the glass building, I spoke my mind without really thinking. "Hey guys. I'm home. Percival Pav." My kunai was lodged into the brick wall of the apartment building that contained my sleeping aunt, as I scrolled through my few messages I have with Izuku, and my newest contact in Auntie Ryuko. Nothing new aside for the conversation I had with Izuku at the end of the previous school day, and Ryuko having wished me good luck in the new school. Speaking of UA, I didn't see Izuku at the whole orientation ceremony yesterday. Hell, his whole class apparently wasn't there. I had my earphones in my ears the whole time that the white mouse guy was yammering on the podium, but I paid attention to the few points that mattered. Something about quirk use being regularized, and free access to the tech support services for all courses, so that was interesting. I've got a couple ideas on what I could commission from tech support, so that should be fun. I slipped my phone back into my jean pocket, and leapt from where I dangled to the same building I scaled yesterday, my hair already freshly dyed, and one of 2-bite brownies in my mouth. I ran across the different buildings all over, as students began to walk down the sidewalks. I scaled down the exact same building all over again, only a slight bit earlier than yesterday to get less people around. Izuku was nowhere to be seen, likely having made no changes to his schedule, as he leaves like a normal person. I don't know why, but I just can't be bothered with stairs. As I came out of the alley, the glass UA building was much more easily noticeable in the dawn sunlight, and the vastly fewer amount of students in the way of my view. I quickly realized yesterday that it is impossible to look cool while running with a backpack. It always bounces up and around on your back, smacking your ass in the most annoying way possible, and makes you look like a toddler running back to mommy after preschool. Unless you've got some sort of army backpack that is strapped to your back real tight, and you are running from roof to roof, or through a trench or something from an action movie, you will look stupid, hence why I refuse to run in front of people with a backpack, and simply walk. How did I figure all this out, you may be asking? I saw two goobers chasing one another down the halls all reckless and shit, and they looked so stupid I almost wanted to laugh. One, I forgot how lively a school can be since it's been a while, but I will admit that at least it's cool to not be bored all the time. I entered the main building of UA, and went down the same flight of stairs as before, heading toward my homeroom. I dropped my stuff off a lot earlier than I had anticipated, and realized I had a while until classes would begin, so I decided to check out the tech support room out of curiosity. 3 minutes of climbing stairs and walking around different hallways, I finally found a room that had the title of tech support at the side, but something was off. Something inside was radiating a vast amount of heat, as were the few people inside, and I could hear lots of yelling and screaming. I swung open the door, opening my mouth to speak, only to be blasted back by a wall of smoke and heat, leaving me confused, yet unharmed. There was a bit of weight on my body as I lay dormant, and I opened my eyes, already seeing the heat signature of a new person. The smoke cleared. I saw the pink-haired individual looking back into the room with a careless smile, even knowing her breasts were stuffed in my face. "Don't worry, I'm A-okay, not even a scratch on me thanks to this conveniently placed pillow," she called into the lab, slapping her hand down on my face without even checking to see what I was. "So, I'm a pillow?" I spoke in a muffled tone, causing her to flinch, and look back down at me slowly. "Look at what you did, you Nimrod." A man adorned in a construction ESC attire started yelling frantically, as the girl still didn't seem to care all too much. "Sorry, you are just so warm that I didn't realize that you were a guy," she said, slapping me on the shoulder without care, earning not even a flinch from me, but a jump from the construction guy. May, please get off of this guy, I'm begging you already. He spoke dimly, cringing to himself as his protege embarrassed the hell out of him, almost earning a laugh out of me. Don't worry, Dad, he doesn't seem all that upset, right? She questioned me curiously, bringing her face down close to mine, leaning her head to the side. The whole Dad thing was news to me, but I digress. I'd prefer if you'd get off of me, but no, it isn't truly terrible. I snapped a spark over to the side, and when it landed a few feet away, I used it to warp out from under her, and immediately got to my feet. I had to change my fire color to blue, as not to bring on any unnecessary suspicion. After dusting myself off, I looked back up, only to see that May girl staring at my hands with starry eyes. May, no, I heard the construction guy say. May, yes, she exclaimed, before grabbing my arm in a grip that was stronger than even Auntie Ryuko's, and dragged me into the lab. Your quirk is so strange, so cool, so unusual. There are so many ways that I could tinker with it. Are you part of the hero course? I was confused, slightly uncomfortable, yet intrigued. No. Oh well, still sounds like fun. Here, try this on. She shoved a glove onto my arm that reminded me of an Iron Man repulsor blaster, but it didn't really feel good on my hand. It's a bit tight, May. She clicked a remote, and it blasted out a beam that instead blasted me back into a wall. Damn, you've got some great endurance. What is your quirk? Heat manipulation, and body enhancement. I was slightly flustered, and stuttered a bit as I spoke. Great quirk. Now, could you try this thing on? And this one, and... She was grabbed on the shoulder by who was supposedly her dad. May, can't you clearly tell that he is uncomfortable? She looked at me for a bit, and then dropped her shoulders. Yeah. She replied sadly, dropping a wrench out of her hand that I couldn't even tell she had. Her father sighed, and patted her on the head. Look, I'm sorry, kid. I'm known around here as Powerloader, the excavation hero, and this one's father. You can just call me Mr. Majima. May's quite a handful, but she's passionate, and incredibly talented at what she does. I dusted myself clean of all the dust from being flung by the glove, and managed to yank it off, only to notice the sad expression on the girl's face, feeling slightly bad, whilst also noticing the other neat-looking devices throughout the lab. I was actually hoping to get some help with a couple things that I could improve about my quirk. I simply prefer a slower pace is all. I give a slight nod, putting my hand on the back of my head. Perfecto. May exclaimed, seemingly appearing in front of me like a damn Looney Tunes character. I looked over to her dad for help, but he simply shrugged, and went to get cleaning supplies for the previous explosion. You see, I was hoping to get a pair of shoes commissioned, like rocket shoes, but not rocket shoes. I can manipulate any form of heat I see or feel, at least so I've been told, and was thinking that shoes that always produce a slight heat boost could give possibilities for cooler attacks, faster running, and flight possibly depending on how far my quirk go. Before I could even finish, she went and dived into a little treasure trove of different devices, and leapt out holding a strange pair of boots. Something similar to these. She slipped them on, and she began to hover in the air, eventually gaining air. Well, yeah, not exactly, but it is pretty similar. I was shocked at how she just already had a similar idea. These are called hover soles. They use fan-like thrusters to get me into the air, but what you're looking for is something that uses heat to boost you, yeah? She said more calmly than ever, seeming relaxed as she slowly came back to the ground. Yep, that was what I think would work best with my quirk. If it's too much trouble for your schedule, I can, cutting me off again. She ran over to a work desk as Powerloader came back with the cleaning supplies. It's no problem, just promise to spread the word, all right? She called back with a new excitement, already drawing down blueprints. Is this gonna cost any? No cost, my treat. You've just given me a whole new idea for a whole new type of support item. This is the least I could do. Before I could speak again, I was grabbed by the shoulder by Powerloader. Once she gets into the zone, she won't get out until she is done. Trust me, whatever you asked for will be done by the end of the week. She gets excited a lot, but this kind of excitement is where she shuts everything out, and goes to work without distraction. Trust me, she'll be okay. With a nod of my head, I quickly took my leave, and began to walk back down the hall so that I could get back to class. I had made my way out of the stairwell, and turned the corner to go to the next one, only to notice two girls talking with one another, one having long raven black hair tied up in a spiky ponytail, the other having a head of short dark purple hair, with violet eyes to match. I recognized her hair from a mile away thanks to the ever-noticeable tendrils coming from her earlobes barely in view. Kyoka's eyes locked onto me in mere moments, her pupils widening very briefly, before a small smile crept onto her face. She spared me a wave, as well as a small head bob and closey-eyed smile. I waved back with a small grin, before walking down the second stairwell, feeling a slight sense of relief knowing that she thankfully got in. Arriving at my classroom just as I did yesterday, I realized I was a tad bit later than I had planned, but I still had a couple minutes to myself. I sat down in the backseat I had chosen yesterday, placed my phone on the table after selecting a song to listen to as I waited, and popped my earphones in to relax. The sax immediately just soothed my eardrums as I closed my eyes and leaned my head back, occasionally bobbing my head to the beat, but not keeping a constant rhythm. I saw my teacher walk into the room, and sit behind his desk just like he did yesterday. The guy, from what I could gather, is a retired hero, having reddish-brown hair combed to the side, shade-covered eyes, and a gray face mask. Not really a tactical-looking mask, but it looked more so like fabric, something that would be used during the COVID era back in the early 2020s. Most of the class had already piled in, including a kid with a hideous mohawk, and someone who seemingly gets less sleep than me. Other than them, nobody really stands out, as expected of general studies. The bell finally rang, and thanks to Heatseeker, I could barely catch Izuku's signature in the 1A room, putting me slightly more at ease. The seats were finally filled up, except for one seat that was empty since someone already got sick on the first day, but I was waiting for the announcements to blare from the speakers to pluck out my earphones. Speak of the devil, all the annoying conversations surrounding the room quickly were silenced at the sounding of the announcements, and Nezu's silly voice began to blare across the school. Good morning, students. Today is a Tuesday and your second day of classes this year. You all know your schedules, so I will let you all off with a little bit of news that may get you excited for the coming months of your education. His energy was frightening considering what he was capable of, but nobody in the school really understood how dangerous the happy little rodent could be except for me and Izuku to a lesser extent than me. In 2 months' time, we will be having our yearly annual sports festival next month. For many of you, this sounds like nothing, but for just as many, this may be your chance to be noticed by teachers who previously ignored you, pitch your talents, and prove your worth on and off the battlefield, to us, and to the heroes of today and tomorrow. I didn't expect him to bring that up so soon, but at UA, they are known to be unpredictable with how they teach you, so I suppose I shouldn't be surprised that they are immediately putting on the pressure. With that, I bid you all a nice day. Nezu, previously an experimental subject under codename V26, Sector 23 of a Quirk Lab, the first and last to ever escape captivity on his own, as the establishment mysteriously burnt to the ground 4 years ago. Before you ask, no, it wasn't me who burnt it down. This mouse keeps on a happy smile, hiding a sadistic and monstrous nature and thought process. Come to think of it, we are slightly similar in that regard, however the difference is that I know him, and he doesn't know me. I would definitely love to keep it that way for as long as necessary, as he could very easily end me in moments with the right resources. I may be mentally damaged, but I'm not an idiot. As the comms clicked off, our teacher stood up in front of the board, and clicked his tongue behind the gray face mask, signaling for the remaining students to sit in their seats. Hello again, students. I understand that we met each other yesterday, but we never had enough time for a proper introduction. My name is Taishiro Toyomitsu, but please just call me Mr. Toyo. He spoke with a rough voice, placing his hand at his hip, inadvertently revealing an incredibly muscular arm that was hardly hidden with his black t-shirt. Come to think of it, this man is incredibly fit all over, seemingly having not a single weak bone on his body. Obviously, some of you have already gotten acquainted with one another, but there are still some who are on their own, so how about I call on you one by one, and you each give your name, your quirk, a hidden talent, and your reason for coming here, yeah? It was clear that this man is new to teaching, so I was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. The student with the hideous mohawk was pointed to first, and he shot up triumphantly. The name is Sutsutaya Agoyamato. I came here to put it to those preppy hero dweebs in 1A and 1B, and my quirk is called Twister. My hidden talent isn't very well hidden, and it's hair styling. His boisterous confidence was enough to get a light snicker out of me, that which he heard immediately. What? Got something to say, lil buddy? Did I say something funny? Without skipping a beat, I shrugged my shoulders with a little grin on my face. Come on, asshole. Spit it out already. Before I could reply, Mr. Toyo was walking toward my desk. Obviously, you feel the need to keep your opinions to yourself, and you didn't mean to let out any form of disrespect, but in my classroom, I prefer an open environment, where we share our thoughts without prejudice. Sir, without at least a bit of restraint on your tongue, the world can easily grow to hate you. Just look at Will Smith. He loosened his restraints on his emotions, and let a harmless joke get to him. His career has never been the same since he chose the wife who hardly loves him over his career, so what good comes from just speaking your mind? I fired back with a bit of agitation, just wanting him to move on. Well, you just spoke your mind there, what's the difference? He asked curiously, irritating me further. I wasn't speaking my mind, I was making an innuendo. It took a lot of effort to create that kind of an opinion, and you seem quite fixated on it though. Only because you won't let a little snicker go. What's so bad about that? The fact that you want me to openly insult a kid's shitty haircut. So that's how you felt, huh? That single slip-up completely threw me off. I'm never this weak-minded. Sutsutaya was behind him, seething from the mouth. Didn't that feel better? To just accept your mind? You didn't plan to laugh, but you did anyway, because that is what your mind directed you to do. That was how you felt. Was it relieving? Now that I thought about it, it was kinda soothing in a sense. My mind at the moment felt ever so slightly less cluttered, and my eyelids were a bit lighter. What of it? I asked spitefully. Obviously, insulting one another is obviously never okay, but lying to someone's face, keeping your thoughts to yourself, and allowing people to walk away whilst knowing that they could get severely hurt by someone else is even worse. In my classroom, we don't keep our thoughts silenced, we speak out loud, just as loud as any hero, any villain, any vigilante, and we make ourselves known as equally important people, who need not have any extra title to be special. We have opinions, we have power of our own, we have voices, and we have wishes and beliefs. Normal, and general. Those are the last words I would ever use to describe what I want this class to be. Though somewhat strange in philosophy, I could understand where he was coming from, and Sutsutaya stopped walking toward me as he began to grow more boisterous. Look, just be open and honest, about me, about your classmates, about yourself, and don't put anybody on a pedestal that is higher than your own. Give criticism, give feedback, and help to improve where possible. In the classroom of Taishiro Toyomitsu, we are all only as strong as the bonds we have as a collective force. He pumped his fist in the air, as everyone went silent. Even up close, I couldn't see his eyes, but I could clearly that he was passionate about his statement, earning a little grin from me. All right, fine. Sutsutaya, your hair belongs in the 60s, and doesn't fit your head shape. I could almost see his pride shatter before my very eyes as he went to his knees, seemingly questioning fate itself. Though the reaction was loony, I looked up to the dark-eyed man standing at my desk, seeing approval in his very limited expression. There, you ripped off the band-aid, doesn't that feel better? I nodded up to him cautiously, looking back at Sutsutaya to see if he was still questioning existence, only to see a girl with brown hair done up in a ponytail comforting him. Since I'm here, I might as well ask you to introduce yourself, right? I clicked my tongue out of slight annoyance, but picked myself back up from my seat. My name is Percival. I'd prefer to not bring up my last name much. My quirk is a form of heat manipulation that constantly has my blood boiling, even though I can't feel any heat whatsoever. I'm still trying to find what my talents are, and my reasons for being here are relatively the same, to find out more about myself. I looked at Sutsutaya expecting an insult, and an insult I received. You smell like burnt bacon. Or rather, an attempted insult. I for one would love to smell like bacon, but that's just me. Thanks for the criticism. He stood up with the girl and went back to their seats as I sat back down. Mr. Toyo continued to ask around the different students, yet was unable to get the insomniac to talk too much, except for admitting that he was called Hitoshi. The bell soon rang after we finally got through the icebreakers, allowing us to go to the cafeteria before coming back for a free period, since he hadn't prepared anything for a proper school day yet. Nobody except for the insomniac really stood out, but there was something about Mr. Toyo that rang certain bells in my head. Not only ones of recognition, but also one of warning? He doesn't seem all too threatening, but my gut hasn't done me wrong in my 6 years of proper combat, so I will have to remain vigilant. It's clear that this building is surrounded by some of Japan's greatest heroes, so my stress will only increase further in time, but a general studies teacher already ringing warning bells is concerning. Why the hell is he so familiar? I swear I have seen him somewhere before. These thoughts riddled my mind as I walked down the hall, eventually reaching the doorway to the cafeteria, already noticing the cook hero lunch rush in the kitchen, cooking up a damn storm whilst the students either watched in awe, or took their food to marvel. What they do with that food is also up for interpretation, as some people I could immediately tell would just take photos for Instagram and then take like 3 bites at best. Others just eat the damn food normally, but some of them just infuriate my inner food critic. I got in line, and had to wait a couple of minutes for everyone to look through the extensive menu to get their meal, but I already had my choice in my mind. When I was finally at the front of the line, I opened my mouth to speak, only for some asshole to pipe up from behind me. Taco, hard shell, salsa cremosa, hold the lettuce, dash of wasabi, and a bowl of mochi balls, and make it quick. The guy yelled as he butted through the line, pissing relatively everyone off. Dude, go to the back, pushing through isn't getting you anywhere. Yeah. There are rules here, newbie, and you can't just be ignoring common sense. 2 students berated the ash-blonde Pomeranian, as he simply stepped up beside me while ignoring them, and began waiting for the concerned lunch rush to start cooking. Look man, I think your food choice was cool and all. Be you? So fucking make it already, he barked, cutting the chef off mid-plea. One as I looked at him, I immediately recognized him as one of the 2 bozos I tossed out of the gym, the louder one to be exact. Okay. Who the hell shoved that stick up your ass? Are you always this much of an incessant prick? I ask as casually as I can, even though I was fuming. I'm the future #1 hero. You all should be bowing and kissing the floor I walk on. I don't know what you all are getting so pissy over. He spoke arrogantly, immediately earning a nice little 12 fuck you from my right arm, sending his ass to the floor. Oh, you're a dead man. He began to pop explosions in his hands, expecting me to still be there when he stopped covering his nose, but whilst he writhed and seethed, I apologized to Lunch Rush for the scene, and asked for a glass of lemonade with a couple brownies. Yes, a strange combo, but my body is far from normal. As I walked, I heard him barking at me, calling me a coward, earning a little chuckle. I found a discreet empty table, and sat down in the corner, placing my earphones back into my ears, and put on a different song than usual, wanting to properly relax. I bobbed my head as I popped a brownie in my mouth, and went on my laptop from my backpack to continue research on a case I had borrowed from the police. I opened another tab just so I could be sure to hide it in the rare case that someone would actually want to talk to me, but I found it unnecessary. Moments of typing later, I heard the noise of a plastic tray being set onto the table right beside me. Before I could say a thing, the person grabbed one of my earphones, and popped it into her ear. I looked up after changing tabs, and that same familiar head of purple hair came into view. Jesus Kyoka, you scared the fuck out of me. That may have been an over-exaggeration, but it felt right at the moment. Sorry, I just saw an opportunity, and I had to take it, she replied slyly with a giggle as I shook my head in discontent, with a smile contradictory to my body language. I'm glad to see that you made it. How'd you do on the practical? I asked curiously as she twirled one of her jacks with her pointer finger. 37 points. Lot more than I ever expected. She spoke with a bit more energy, still with a slightly bland expression and tone. It was nothing compared to the first place guy though. I turned my head slightly, wondering who #1 was. Who got first? Some guy named Midoriya. He got hundreds of points, and trumped second and third with no issue. Now, why the hell did he leave that information out when he said he passed initially? Now I have a new conversation topic for when we gets out of school. Well, that is his score, and he passed. But what matters more than that, is the fact that you passed too. Just because you aren't the best, it doesn't mean you're the worst. She nodded slightly in understanding. Thanks I guess. Okay, change of topic, but where did you find this song? It feels nice on the ears. I shrugged my shoulders casually. An anime I watched a couple years ago. It's an oldie from around the early COVID era. Komi can't something something? I don't remember much, but the music was fantastic. Komi can't communicate? She inquired curiously, to which I perked up and nodded with a brownie in my mouth, pointing at her in a way to say, that's it, I didn't think someone like you would like anime. She spoke with a hint of confusion. I simply like animation as a whole. It's impressive what people can do when staring out with just pencil to paper. She nodded along, taking a few bites from her strawberry shortcake. Didn't think that you would like something that's traditionally sweeter than a strictly sugar-flavored tart. I mused sarcastically, earning a playful scowl from the girl. You saying I'm not sweet? I'd prefer to be sour anyway. She retorted jokingly, as I chuckled slightly. I think I'd taste bitter, but you think you'd be sour? I was more expecting salt. We both took a moment of silence, before breaking out into quiet laughter. This is the second time we've ever talked, and this is already the weirdest conversation I've ever had. She spoke giddily, seemingly bouncing in her seat as the song ended, and autoplayed another song. This one, completely unbefitting of the current moment. When the first note broke, my humor having been tainted by modern media urged me into spitting out a bit of my lemonade, which in turn caused Kyoka to laugh at my expense even more. I quickly reached into my pocket, and paused the song on my phone, trying to rebuild composure. Normally I can do that within moments under pressure, but for some reason, my body didn't want to stop laughing. Your music taste needs work. She mused sarcastically in between breaths as our laughter slowed to a stop. What can I say? I'm a man of unique taste. I say as I change the song onto something a little bit more calm. Okay. I can vibe with Violet Evergarden, she said quickly, closing her eyes as she took another bite of the cake with a satisfied grin. As we sat in silence for a while, listening to the song and eating without uttering a word, the refined girl with raven hair who I mentioned earlier approached the table with her own tray, and a girl with bright pink skin was right beside her. Kyoka, what are you doing here? She questioned curiously as the girl with pink skin caught up, eating with an acquaintance. Wait, are we friends? Kyoka turned toward me as she asked a question that I didn't even know the answer to. I mean, do you think we are? She paused for a moment and responded. Yeah, why not? I could only nod in response as I smiled, feeling a slight sense of relief even though I likely shouldn't. All right. Changing my answer to eating with a friend. She told the taller girl casually, a small non-flamboyant smile adorning her features. This boy just got into an altercation with Bakugo earlier. Do you think hanging around with delinquents will look good for you? That remark actually struck a nerve. Okay, he cut in line, was yelling cusses at everyone, was disrespecting lunch rush, and had the gall to tell me to kiss the ground. I socked him once in the nose, and walked away, so that makes me a delinquent? The tall female stared into my eyes and I did the same, not backing down until I heard Kyoka pipe up again. You really did that? Hesitantly, I nodded my head, expecting an earphone jack to go for my eye, but I heard her speak once more. Word. She reached into my pocket, and casually began scrolling through my music options without even asking, as me and her female friend just stared at her in odd silence. Kyoka. Are you sure you're okay around him? She asked with concern, only offending me further. Yep, he's chill, and apparently a genius on your level with how easy the exam was for him. She casually added that last part in, immediately earning me glances from the two other girls. Easy, how? Before I could even respond, Kyoka did instead. He finished in like 20 minutes, and got a perfect score too. The pink-skinned girl practically lunged at me, getting me to scoot away as she began to plead. How the hell did you understand all that? I didn't have a response, as I thought it was common to do that well after seeing Midoriya initially. Well, if Kyoka trusts you, I suppose I can try to as well. The refined girl relented, sitting down where I had previously. My name is Momo Yaoyorozu, you may refer to me as Yaoyorozu-san. I heard her request, yet I immediately asked a question. How about just Yaoyorozu? She thought for a moment, before nodding. My name is Mina Ishido, but I prefer Mina. Mina spoke proudly, immediately giving me a hug that I didn't love, nor hate. Well, you two can call me Percival. I'd prefer not to mention my birthright. They both nodded in understanding, and we moved on shortly thereafter. I was finally able to move after a few more seconds of hugging, and swiped back my phone from Kyoka's hands, finding a few more songs on a new playlist. Just a few suggestions, that's all. She spoke slyly. I nodded in response, surprised she was that legible about music of this amount and variety, internally promising to try each one out. It feels so nice to sit down after today's class. I bobbed my head, curious of what Mina meant, especially when Kyoka chuckled whilst nodding, and Yaoyorozu looked down at her plate of medium-rare steak with a tired expression. Hero training of some sort? I asked, to which they nodded. How bad was it? I asked once more, to only receive groans from Mina and Yaoyorozu. Our wounds were kissed all better by Recovery Girl, but I'm as tired as a single mother, and want to cry like a newborn. Mina relented drowsily. The whole Bakugo and Midoriya thing too. Momo added on. Okay, now I was intrigued. What the hell happened out there? I asked with concern, earning a groan from Kyoka. I suppose we should start from the beginning? Yaoyorozu asked, urging me to nod. Alright. It started off like Izuku Pav. The door slid to the side much easier than it did yesterday, maybe because I felt more at ease, or maybe it just hadn't been opened in a while before. Either way, I walked into class with as much of a stone face as I could muster, keeping a much more straight face than I would have way back when. That was until I saw a certain pink-cheeked cinnamon roll, of course. Heya Deku, she called from the doorway right behind me, making me jump back in confusion and surprise. Jesus Uraraka. You scared the bejesus out of me. I exclaimed passionately, the composure I fought hard to obtain crumbling to dust, and blowing away in the coming warm breeze. I don't know where that breeze is coming from since we are inside, but all I know is that my face feels hot, and my smile doesn't want to be normal. Sorry Deku, I'm just super excited for today's classes. She responded energetically, pumping her fist in the air happily, causing my heart to squeeze. But we don't even know what our classes are going to be. Why are you so excited? I questioned as she simply shrugged her shoulders. I just know that today is gonna be fun. I can feel it. She closed her eyes in content, keeping both fists at chest height. Why, are you nervous Deku? She asked innocently, bobbing her head to the side. Well, being one of the first attempts at a quirkless hero does tend to get you a little jumpy. I replied in a strained tone. Wait, you're really quirkless? I thought Bakugo was spitting crap. You're actually quirkless? I nod slightly, expecting her sweet attitude to waft away like usual, but her smile only widened. Well then that just makes what you did during the exam all the more amazing. How did you get that big robot to listen to you? With starry eyes, she began to look at me with even more curiosity and energy than before, which is a result I never anticipated I would receive, especially from someone capable of making it to the hero course. The wires were simple to hotwire, I guess. She just started hopping in place, pestering me a bit further. How the hell did you get the 1, 2 and 3 pointers to just blow up? Mina told me all about it, and it sounds awesome. She raved happily, bouncing on her feet as more students began to pile in. E's not that big of a deal. 2 made a gamble, and it paid off, that's all. I relented while scratching my head, and shutting my eyes. I opened my eyes soon after, only to immediately make eye contact with Izumi, who was glaring daggers into my soul, knowing damn well she couldn't just confront me or there would be questions. The Pomeranian behind her, only being reeled in by the fact that Izumi was urging him to do nothing through body language. Don't say that. What you did was awesome. You took down the 0-pointer alone. That's gotta give you some sort of certainty, right? I hesitantly nodded in response, earning a bright smile from the innocent girl. There you go. You fought hard to get here, so why don't you allow yourself a bit of confidence? She spun on her heel, and skipped her way toward her seat, leaving me standing in a daze. Quickly snapping out of it, I walked over to the desk right next to hers as I did yesterday, and sat down in silence, taking glances on occasion at Uraraka. I promised myself that I would stop being weird with girls, and would focus more on being less of a player, but when it came to her, I just don't think I can help myself. As the morning bell rang, I locked my eyes on the front board, waiting for Aizawa to make his entrance. What I didn't expect was to see him just sit up from under the front desk, and begrudgingly force himself to stand up, cracking his back like a glowstick. Some of you are late, huh? Did they not hear a word of what I said yesterday? The few in question soon slid open the door in a rush, revealing Mina, a yellow-haired boy, and a relatively unfazed, more mature-looking girl. Yaoyorozu, Kaminari, Ashido, you're already late for a class, and you don't even have schoolwork yet. What gives? Aizawa asked in an annoyed tone, as the mature girl who likely was Yaoyorozu piped up. Apologies Mr. Aizawa, my hair gets all tangled up in the morning, I toss and turn a lot, and it takes ages to fix it. I can vouch for her, her hair looks like a Tasmanian devil tornado whenever she wakes up. I've slept over with her before, and have never seen anything quite like it. A girl with dark purple hair called from her seat in the back of the class. I'm so sorry, my alarm clock was broken by my little brother yesterday, and I couldn't get up fast enough. Ashido began bowing rapidly, before scooting off to an empty seat in front of Uraraka. Alright. Kaminari. What's your story? I looked over to Kaminari, seeing a relatively absent expression on his face, but I could also see slight lipstick smears that had clearly been wiped, but not nearly enough. Oh. Nothing too crazy, I guess. I just got distracted. He looked down as he said that, maybe embarrassed. He clearly has a girlfriend, and a feisty one at that, so maybe he doesn't want to say. I mean, who would? Alright, just focus on coming to school earlier, alright? Aizawa relented with a groan as Kaminari nodded, and walked over to a seat next to Bakugo. Yayorozu took her seat right up in the front beside the jet-legged boy who annoyed me during the exam. Alright class, I don't even know why I asked you all to sit, because you are all gonna be standing right back up. Hell, I'm not even gonna be the only one teaching you this time. I could already hear the inhale from outside the door, and the ever so recognizable hair of our number one hero standing outside the door. The door then burst open, and the triumphant cry that I knew was coming was quickly exclaimed. I am here, he shouted with pride, as the whole room erupted in cheers of shock and excitement. It's All Might. I never thought I would get to meet him, Uraraka exclaimed excitedly. Is that his Silver Age costume? A girl with green hair asked. Huh? I heard Izumi and Bakugo exclaim at once, likely not having heard a damn thing about him becoming a teacher. Percival has been digging into this whole establishment since his second year of his lifestyle, so he already knew way too much for one guy. Finding out about All Might's presence was merely light work once I began to aid him in his espionage. Percival has told me that he knows much about him, including the fact that he now has a time limit for his muscle form, but not much else. Seems like my father's age is catching up to him. Greetings, young hero students. It is so nice to see all of your smiling faces, as I not only get to teach your hero practical training alongside Eraserhead, but also help to ensure future peace and prosperity once you all join the rankings and fight alongside us. All Might exclaimed boisterously, earning NPCESC applause from Jetlag Guy, and several excited murmurs across the room. Does that mean we are doing hero training already? A shark-toothed boy with bright red hair asked excitedly, getting up from his seat while bursting with energy. That would be correct, Kirishima, so don't let all that energy go to waste. Aizawa replied with a small smirk, causing the now-named Kirishima to punch his palm with a grin of his own. Now obviously, you cannot just leap into hero action in just a few seconds. Without your hero suits at least. Depending on your seat choice that Aizawa has written down yesterday, the case with that same number will contain your hero gear that you yourselves specifically designed and passed in on the day of your exam. So get it already. All Might quickly after pressing a button bolted down the hall at what seemed to be light speed, with Aizawa just sighing and deciding on a simple leisurely stroll. I ran over to my case number and opened it up. A violet and black bulletproof light Kevlar top, a black face mask that filtered any air to make it clean, cut sleeves, a belt of smoke pellets and weakened flashbangs, 2 batons that connected to make a non-fatal spear staff, knee and elbow pads, dark purple sneakers with a bit of red to pay homage to my usual fit, and contact lenses for the day that my Geass may possibly go berserk. Overall, pretty decent for a start, but I feel too much like a knockoff Nightwing. All I need is the symbol and I would be practically cosplaying him. I packed away my items of clothing, whilst keeping a gold pen in my pocket. What does it do? A wizard only reveals a secret through combat, so you'll just have to wait. I quickly went right back to the stall again, hiding my scars as I did the day before. The doors soon opened again, and as the other guys walked in with their suits, I was already walking out whilst wearing my relatively simple, yet effective suit. 3. You can slow down a bit if you want, you are more than ahead of schedule at this point. Kirishima suggested while putting a hand on my shoulder. That was both pleasant, yet slightly undermining. I simply like being early. Better early than late, that is one of many lessons I've learned through my years of schooling. I mean, just think about it, I used to get beatings on a daily basis in middle school, so getting to school before they could touch me was somewhat of a grace period. Until recess, I guess. Alright. Just don't push yourself too much, okay? You did pretty damn well on the test yesterday, and clearly want to do well, but just remember that we are all humans with limits. Kirishima spoke with a passionate and genuine smile, showcasing his sharp teeth in a shockingly unthreatening manner. Thank you, I'll think about it. I responded slowly, before running down to the training grounds, His advice did hit pretty hard, but I have to push myself, or I won't be able to keep up. I arrived in front of Aizawa and my father pretty damn quick, having a couple of minutes to catch the little breath I lost during my running. I pulled up my face mask over my nose after a few moments of steady breathing, and opened my eyes to meet the dead-on gaze from All Might. "So, you made it, huh?" he asked casually. Yep. I guess I did." I responded curtly, tugging on my collar slightly during the incoming silence. "First place too. I didn't realize you had gotten this strong," he remarked slowly, turning his head to look away from me briefly. "Shocker." I gave the shortest response I could think of, not even having planned for it to come out as it did. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked with slight agitation, turning to look back at me. "Why don't you ask Azumi's flawless record, and the scars on my back what that means, because each one is worth a million explanations on their own." I shot back quickly, anger beginning to boil over at the worst possible time. "Look, Izuku, I understand why you resent your sister, I do, and I'm sorry if I've left you feeling left out at all, but it's not her fault that she was given a quirk at birth and not you. It was simply the luck of the draw." "Resent her? She and Bakugo have been chasing me down, attacking me, putting me on the edge of life and death on a near-daily basis, for the past 11 years, and you think that I resent her? I never felt left out, because Mom saw through both of you like a pane of glass, and she gave me the attention and care that a child needs. I made it here without some stupid quirk, so you can shove your Father of the Year act up your ass, and twist away." I ranted for the last few remaining seconds of solitude, causing All Might to shut his trap immediately. Mr. Aizawa just stood there in silence the whole time, not piping up once, not even bothering to listen much at all, which I am thankful for. Kirishima soon ran out of the door that led to the training grounds, his overtly revealing costume sticking out amongst the few other students who arrived close behind him. Mina's costume was laced with bright cotton candy-colored latex, tight enough to reveal her fit physique and curvaceous figure without seeming too much, unlike certain heroes. Some costumes stood out a lot less than others, like Kaminari's costume literally just being a shirt, a jacket, black jeans, and visors. I wouldn't say that to his face, but man is it unthreatening for any villain that may cross his path. Bakugo walked right beside him, with literal fucking grenade gauntlets and a devilish eye mask to pair with it. I hate him, I really do, but he has always had a knack for certain art forms, I can't deny that. Good to see that all of you decided to show up. A few minutes late for some of you, but I digress. Mr. Aizawa mused dryly, pinching the bridge of his nose while shutting his eyes in annoyance. Must you always be such a spoil sport? They came. They're dressed like a proper hero, and they are ready to learn, isn't that enough? All Might questioned with confusion. Sir, if I may, if more than half the class is 4 minutes late, it's clear that either something happened, or they couldn't be bothered to come on time. A simple presence isn't enough to justify. Let's get a move on, shall we? The jet-legged kid was quickly cut off by Mr. Aizawa before his rant got any more annoying. Yes, he was correct, but ranting about it will just piss people off. With a simple hand gesture from Aizawa, we all began to follow him and All Might away from the sandfields, and I could already see a lot of buildings in the distance. I could already tell since I had read a ton of brochures and magazines about this place as a kid, we were moving to one of the mock cities for practice. When we finally arrived at the mock city, you could see other areas nearby, including what I recognized as a recreation of the Tokyo settlement from the Britannian era. The other cities looked quite realistic, minus the lack of people besides us in the whole enclosure. As you can probably tell, this will be where your first course of proper heroics training will commence, as well as further classes in the future. Dad explained with his usual grin, as more excited mumbling erupted from everyone except for our teachers. Inside of one of these buildings, you will find a papier match bomb on the first floor. With a randomly selected partner, you will either play the role of heroes infiltrating the building to fight and/or capture another group of 2 with the supplied capture tape, who will be protecting the bomb instead, and acting as villains. This will not only simulate a station terrorist attack, but also demonstrate that most heroes just team up on the spot instead of collaborating all the time. As Aizawa explained what we would be doing, I not only saw Mr. Jet Leg Guy raise his hand to ask a question, and seconds later as he heard the second sentence out of his mouth, that was until Yaoyorozu raised her own hand after his spiel. Yes? Aizawa asked, gesturing to Yaoyorozu to speak. If I may, sir, how will you be doing these random teams? Will it be as simple as reaching for names in a hat? Aizawa opened his mouth to speak, but was cut off by All Might. As simple as taking balls from a box. As he spoke, he ran off into the distance at blinding speed, and returned within 2 seconds with a box that had a hole at the top. Aizawa sighed at his incessant shouting, pinching the bridge of his nose again. What All Might meant was that he was going to reach into the box, and pull out a ball. Whoever's name is on the ball will get to come up and draw for their teammate. We will repeat this process 9 times, as the 10th time would be fairly obvious since there would only be 2 people remaining. Once you get your teammate, depending on where your team is placed on the brackets, that will determine your opponents, your roles, your turn to go, and which building you have been assigned. Is that understood? Everyone nodded as he explained every little detail of the mission while All Might just stood back, not knowing what to say at this point since he lacked common knowledge of teaching, I assume. But this last rule is absolute. No matter what, under no circumstances, do you keep kicking the enemy while they're down, and in conjunction with that last point, no matter how angry we feel. We do not kill. Have I made myself clear? His eyes burned red hot as he glared at us, urging us to nod in understanding. I noticed out of the corner of my eye that Bakugo's head hadn't moved, neither had his mouth, but I was sure that it was nothing to worry about. All right then, All Might, if you will. All Might quickly reached into the box, and pulled out a pink ball, and read the name. Mina Ishido, step up. The pink-skinned girl sighed heavily, and stepped up to the box, reaching in and feeling around for what would hopefully be the perfect teammate. When she pulled up the ball, she let out a small sigh of relief, before spinning on her heel. Ochako! She exclaimed energetically, both girls running up to one another, and hugging happily. That immediately rang warning bells in my head, but I kept my mouth shut until I would see their opponents. All Might reached back into the box, and pulled out a name. Honta Zero, you're up! He exclaimed, as who I could only assume to be Zero stepped up, Timmy Turner teeth and all. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. He reached his hand in, and yanked out the first ball he touched, and read the name, immediately confused as to who it was he had picked. Koji. Koda. At that, a boy with a very strange-looking head lit up, and stepped up with an innocent and happy grin behind his red bandana. With a heavy sigh, Zero walked over to the boy who quite frankly, I either forgot about, or have never seen before. All Might again reached in, smiling widely as always, but not saying a word until he read the name on the ball. Meso Shoji, make it count. The guy with the multiple arms walked up, and I again just couldn't get over how each one was as well built as the other. He had already earned my respect in the strength test yesterday, but clearly this guy was more than dedicated to the path of strength. He reached into the box, and pulled out a viridian green ball, reading the name. Izuku Midoriya? I actually perked up at the sound of my name, and raised my hand with a grin. Even though I hadn't seen his mouth, I could tell by his eyes that he was grinning too. He walked over to me, and I reached out my hand for a handshake. Which hand are you asking for? Each one has a different personality, and get offended when one isn't offered a handshake, so choose wisely. Wait, do they really? I asked in bewilderment, wishing I had my notebook right about now. No, brother, I was kidding. He replied with a smirk, prompting me to laugh a bit at my stupidity. Despite all that tutoring I had been given, I suppose that I can be felled by jokes rather than deception. Interesting. All Might reached into the box, and pulled out another name. Shoto Todoroki. The candy cane-haired boy then stepped forward, finally giving me a proper way to identify him. He soon reached into the box, and pulled out a name. Fumikage Tokiyami. Am I saying that right? The boy with a beak nodded in response, stepping forward to give Todoroki a path to get to him. All Might then reached into the box once more, pulling out a golden brown ball. Mashirao Ojiro. The tail-bound boy jogged up to the box, taking long, calm, and deep breaths to calm himself. His tail was dancing around behind him, clearly showing that part of him was excited. Izumi Yagi? All I heard from her was her cursing under her breath as she rose her hand, Bakugo absolutely fuming that he couldn't be with his queen. Before we could have time to breathe, someone else was called up. Katsuki Bakugo. All Might sounded like the Smash Brothers. Ultimate announcer to an extent. So to distract myself from having to look up at that asshole, I daydreamed about how I would be back on Smash once I got home. I may not have had my debut yet, but I have my priorities. Bakugo went up to the box, and shoved his hand in angrily, pulling out a black ball. "Momo Yaoyorozu?" he asked gruffly, as Yaoyorozu raised her hand. "It's a pleasure to be working with Yo. Don't care, didn't ask, go fuck yourself," he replied curtly, walking away from the crowd and leaning against a mock building while crossing his arms. I felt genuinely bad for her really, but knowing them, they would work together begrudgingly. I know that Yaoyorozu was part of the recommended crowd since I saw her walk toward that exam on the day of exams. I just hadn't known her then, so she is likely to be superbly strong and smart, pairing great with Bakugo's strategic mind. "You think those two will actually fight well?" Shoji asked, leaning down to talk to me. "I dunno, they might. But it all depends on whether Bakugo is interested or not." He looked at me, puzzled. "Do you know him or something?" I nodded solemnly. "He is immensely strong, and used to have the heart of a hero. But ever since his sister moved away, nobody could really put a leash on his ego. Plus, I don't have any form of power, so he kinda ruled my life for a while. And thus, divorce papers were born." "Huh, so he just fights with anger then, huh?" I nodded with a frown, knowing damn well that even though I hated him, I always held out hope that someday he would have a realization moment, and Kachan would come back, but that moment never happened. "Well, I bet he'll pull through eventually," he replied, putting one of his hands on my shoulder. "Do each of your hands have specific purposes, like, this one being the comfort hand or something?" I jested, trying to lighten the mood. What I didn't expect was for him to just start laughing his ass off. It wasn't even that funny, but he just started laughing. After a few moments, he was clutching his stomach, trying to catch his breath. Oh man. Why did that get me so much?" he asked himself as I looked at him to be sure he was okay. While we goofed off, the rest of the teams were selected: Iida and Kaminari, Kirishima and Hagakure, Sato and Aoyama. The last two remaining were Tsuyu Asui and Kyoka Jiro, who were called up by All Might anyway, as he forgot that they were the last two, because of course he did. After a few moments of getting to know our teammates, we all looked up at Aizawa, noticing another screen had basically just appeared behind him, the budget of this establishment never ceasing to amaze. "Alright everyone, you've got your partner, you've got your shit, now all you need is your roles, your buildings, and your opponents. Mind you, I have crafted these matchups to the best of my ability, to be sure that at your best, each team has a chance at success, no matter how terrifying the odds are. Now then, here's everything you need to know up here," he nonchalantly explained, stepping away from the screen, allowing us to look at the brackets. I looked for me and Shoji's names, and eventually found them. When I found the names, I then looked over at our opponents, and my heart sank. "Hey, Shoji?" I asked with a bleak tone. "Yeah, what's good man?" he asked curiously, before looking up at our opponents. "I think Bakugo might have a reason to be interested now." I turned my neck to look over at my old friend, turned scorned and hateful bully, not only with the fear of my old self, but the confidence and perception of the new me. I wasn't afraid of him anymore, I couldn't be, not after everything I have done to come this far. As he grinned maniacally at me, with his teammate on the sidelines, I vowed to myself that I would certainly win. I already had a few ideas in mind, the creative juices were flowing just as fast as my adrenaline, and for the first time since I put on the mask for the first time, even though both times I felt like I was staring death in the face, I felt so alive. Izuku Pav. The first match will begin as soon as both teams are ready, and the bomb has been hidden to the villain team's preference. Uraraka and Ishido will wait outside of the building, studying the map and layout of the building, while Izumi and Ojiro set up the bomb, and plan their defense strategy. If you are tied up by the supplied capture tape from either side, then you are immediately eliminated. Are there any questions? All Might spoke with pride and certainty, staring at the screen that projected the hundreds of cameras inside and outside the building, not even looking back at the class. If both of the villains are tied up, does that mean the heroes win? Or do they need to get to the bomb still? The girl with purple hair asked curiously. Think about it, Kyoka. If you detain the villains, but the bomb countdown keeps ticking down, is everything okay? Yaoyorozu inquired whimsically, causing the girl dressed with a punkish attire to nod with understanding. During this, All Might could only stare at the screen with a grin, not even paying attention to the question, even though he had asked for them himself. His eyes were glued on Izumi, not even her teammate, which only urged me to roll my eyes, little surprise to be had. The room that All Might had brought us to had several different screens all around, granting several different angles of every possible location for combat, so I decided to check up on Ochako and Mina. From what I could tell, they were having fun and chatting, giggling and only really looking at the map. I was worried for the two of them mostly because of Izumi. Her raw power and intelligence have always surprised me, and it seems that they are none the wiser. I probably should have warned them beforehand, but in all honesty, giving them an unfair advantage wouldn't feel right, despite my favor for them. Looking over to Izumi's team, they have already found a place to put the papier match bomb, and Izumi was stalking that damn layout map like a hawk. Her teammate was trying to talk to her, but it looked as if she wasn't listening. If Ochako and Mina want to win, then they have to rely on their trust and synergy. If Izumi wants to win, she will have to crush them swiftly, and on her own. Honestly, it could go either way, and I'm all for it.
Izumi Pav, quote. Hey, are you even listening to me? The random husk that nobody asked for asked desperately as I looked over the layout for the third time, being sure that I could figure out the fastest routes to and from the entrance and hiding spot. Do I have a need to? I asked rhetorically. Look, I get that you are strong and all, but I'm not useless. I got into this school just like you, and no you didn't. Last I remember, you barely made it through the regular phony exam, whilst I got the top score in the recommended exam. Shut the fuck up and guard this thing like the dog you are. I replied without expression, standing up and beginning to stretch. I heard the dipshit sigh, and just walk back over to the bomb. You don't leave that damn bomb. The fighting is my job, the bomb is yours. I say with finality, waiting for the bitches outside to be ready. Out of nowhere, a timer began to tick down on a big screen, which I assumed was the starting timer, meaning that they were ready. The timer ticked down from a 1-minute mark, and I got into a starting position. I could hear the two amateurs still talking outside, and I could only sigh with annoyance. They finally stopped talking for the last 10 seconds, as it ticked down with more of an audible click. As the clock hit 0, a loud blaring alarm played out across the city, and I darted down the hall, hovering over the ground and propelling myself forward with my mind.
I can already feel their presence in one of the earlier halls, sprinting toward the closest staircase they could find. I was already chuckling to myself as I turned another corner, knowing full well I am going to win on my own. Dad is watching, and he's going to see his prized pupil prove to these fuckers that I am superior. I hope Deku's watching too. Maybe then, that homewrecker will finally understand the gap between me and him. Mina Pav. Hiding around a corner isn't exactly how I expected my first match as a hero to go. Nor did I expect to watch Uraraka get bodied by Yagi within a couple seconds, but after that, I know that there isn't a chance I can win in a one-on-one contest. She snapped Ochako's arm like a twig with just a thought, and is seeking me out like a damn bloodhound. If I could get past her, then maybe there'd be a chance, but there's just no fucking way. No. No, no, no. Midori was able to make an entire army of androids just explode by taking a random and stupid gamble, and he did it with a straight face. If he can do that while being smart, why the hell can't I be stupid while being stupid? I mean, all heroes are meant to be semi-stupid in one way, right? Yeah. If I'm not willing to get hurt and take risks, then what's the point?
My shoes began to squeak as I shot up and off the ground, making a sound that I knew would draw the telepath toward me, but instead of taking an evasive route I just ran the most obvious way possible, knowing Izumi didn't know me well, and would expect me to take a different one. My breath was ragged and desperate, but I couldn't hear anyone or anything, and my steps had quieted a bit after my initial squeak, so I just had to find the stairs and I would be golden.
I found the indent on the wall where Uraraka was bodied, yet I didn't find the girl herself, so I'm assuming she was just taken out while I cowered for 3 minutes straight. But if the indent was here, then the stairs weren't too far away, and yes, I know that Ojiro is strong. But as long as he isn't Yagi, then I am perfectly fine with fighting him. Izumi Pav. I'm an idiot. I'm a fucking idiot. I lost focus for 1 fucking minute, and this is what's happening. Are you fucking kidding me? I can't fucking believe that I'm already getting bested, and by the simplest straight shot imaginable of all things. Jackass. Can you hear me? I shouted into the earpiece I was given, praying Ojiro hadn't fallen asleep or anything. I'm a little busy up here, you know, he retorted, seemingly out of breath. What's going on up there? Tell me. I screamed, already beginning to dart toward the stairs. 2M fighting Ashido right now, and I need to concentra W8 no Santo. As I arrived at the stairs, I found it broken up into several pieces, a mystery miasma having broken it down over a minute. And of all people to be waiting at the top, helping all these little pieces float was none other than the bitch I slammed at the start. You should have tied me up when you had the chance. Ochako Pav. 8 minutes earlier. You think we're gonna find anyone soon? I mean, we've been running for a while, and I'm getting bored. Mina complained as we ran down the hall together, her shoes squeaking against the floor every few moments. Let's hope we do. I replied curtly, locking in to be sure that I am prepared for conflict. We turned a corner to find a staircase that we had specifically mapped out earlier. Mina wasn't really paying attention to anything except for the late game map. I had to practically babysit her for the first few minutes because she simply lacked the patience to pay attention, but at least we have synergy. As we reached the staircase, I made it to the top first, only to feel my legs get lighter instantly. Aw shit, Mina. Before I could finish my sentence, my arm just dislocated itself, and I was swung by the legs into the wall several times, breaking the concrete with every swing. Mina screamed in confusion and fear, spun on her heel, and ran back through the maze of hallways of the second floor. The wind had escaped my sails, and my whole body felt like garbage. I glanced up from the floor after I had been dropped, and saw Izumi floating over to me. That was pathetic. She reprimanded me, deciding that it would be a good time to spit on my face as I recoiled in pain from every slight movement I tried to make. She soon afterward rocketed off to try and find Mina, not even bothering to tie me up. I forced myself to get back up, gritting my teeth as my back screamed at me to stop. I climbed up the steps, trying to find anything I could use my quirk on at the top, but to no avail. I leaned back against the wall to support my body, waiting to hear something, anything from down the hall, or from the loudspeakers, eventually hearing something I never expected to hear. The squeaking of Mina's shoes from downstairs. I could hear her ragged breathing as she sprinted, and could tell that she was panicking, so I forced myself to speak. Mina. She spun on her heel, and locked eyes with me. Confusion riddled her face. Use your acid to break apart the staircase. I can use the pieces to attack. She desperately nodded along as she used her quirk to form a weak acid, not to fully melt the stairs, but to break it down into shards and boulders. Get the fuck out of here, and find the bomb. I'll see what I can do against Yagi. She nodded frantically, sprinting down the hall knowing exactly where to go since she actually paid attention. As the acid congealed and cooled off in the air, I used as much force as I could to stomp the concrete and acid into shards with my foot, and tapped all of them with my fingers. I could hear Yagi yelling something down the hall, probably yelling at Ojiro for her own mistakes. How she didn't catch Mina, I will only know after the battle is over. When she arrived, she took a bit to assess what she was seeing, and I couldn't help but grin as she looked up at me. You should have tied me up when you had the chance. I taunted, using my quirk to increase the gravity of all the shards, slamming them downward toward her. She was able to stop a bunch of them with her mind, but it was clear that she wasn't used to this many targets, so she was quickly overwhelmed. Strong quirk, strong will, strong mind, strong body, yet all of that means nothing when you are inexperienced. Ain't that right, Yagi? I taunted, my arm feeling like trash the whole time, forcing me to use my inferior arm. Don't go getting a big head, you bitch. She screamed back, her voice cracking like ice. I've been practicing with my quirk on millions of grains of sand for years. You have more power, but you have far less focus. I suggest that you take your own advice. I yelled at her, sending the rest of the shards down, cutting her up, and caving in her quickest way to the Mina. Take those cuts for my arm, asshole. I yelled angrily through the pile of rubble, hearing her try to break through it with sheer force making me want to laugh. You think rubble can beat me? She asked rhetorically, using her mind to push and break down some of the rubble, slowly but surely. It doesn't have to forever for it to give us a win. I simply had to keep stalling while I waited for Mina to beat Ojiro. Having a tail is cool and all, but is it immune to acid? Izuku Pav. This fight is simply confusing to watch. How Izumi didn't figure out that Mina had left was beyond me. Maybe she isn't used to multiple targets? Maybe she isn't used to actual combat? I mean, she would use her quirk on me a whole lot, but it wasn't like I was fighting back or anything. Mina was already whooping Ojiro's ass, skating around him on her slick acid, overwhelming him with speed and acrobatics, and getting closer to the bomb each time she lunged for it. Izumi wasn't making much progress on the avalanche that Ochako came up with, which I mean, props to her for the split-second idea. Izumi's eyes were bloodshot from her overuse of her quirk, and Ochako was allowed to rest since she had let go of all the rubble, so it all depended on who could tie up who, or defeat who first, Mina or Ojiro. And to be honest, the tides continued to turn in Mina's favor, as Ojiro couldn't risk getting burns, and Mina was much faster generally. Eventually, Mina was able to slide past the tailed boy, and touch the bomb with 3 minutes to spare. All Might sighed heavily, and pressed a button that blared the alarm from before out across the city, and reluctantly spoke into the loudspeaker. Well done from both teams, however, the hero team of Ochako Uraraka and Mina Ishido has touched the bomb, meaning that they are the winners. Despite the audio being pretty muffled, I could hear Izumi begin screaming from the camera, and also All Might's earpiece. We barely heard any conversation from the earpiece despite Izumi's screaming, showing lack of communication from both teams, so it looks like neither team is getting picture-perfect marks, especially since Izumi not only broke composure and ignored Ojiro, but also used excessive force on Ochako. Yes, she was meant to be a villain, but that was too far, even for her. Medical droids were already making their way to the building, and All Might was scrolling through a tablet that provided options for a new building to use since the one that they had used was clearly not usable at this point in time. Mina and Ojiro shook hands, and made their way down the stairs to find Uraraka laying down to not only catch her breath, but to let her back rest. Mina ran over to her, and basically began sobbing into her chest, accidentally turning on her earpiece, and began to apologize for running away. I felt bad watching Mina's point of view, mostly because her heart was beating faster than she was running, and that was saying something. The droids broke in through the windows, and began to carry the injured out and toward the medical bay. All right. Todoroki, Tokiyami, you two will be the villains in the next round. Aoyama, Sato, you two will be the heroes. Get going to plot 3A1. All Might spoke curtly, and with little excitement, clearly a bit butthurt that his darling daughter lost so convincingly. I honestly am shocked he didn't call a timeout, or call for a penalty. At least he ain't playing favorites, I guess. The 4 students he spoke to, he tossed them 2 maps of the building's layout, and 4 rolls of capture tape. As they took their leave, I couldn't really bring myself to say anything. All 4 of them used their quirks so expertly to the point that I'm not certain I can win without my Geass. I expected Izumi to just body both of them alone, but she decided to play with her food and lost focus, so I've actually remembered something. Every quirk has a limit and a weakness. My Geass has limits, but not weaknesses, nor does my body. That is my biggest advantage except for my training and intelligence. I have to think hard on how to defeat Bakugo, except for his lone wolf type of combat style being a liability similarly to Izumi. Not to mention that Yaoyorozu was recommended, so she ain't a pushover either. Hey, you good man? You're muttering a whole lot, and I don't know if it's just gibberish, or if it has meaning. Ooh, sorry, I just do that sometimes. Can't really control it. I pinched the bridge of my noise in embarrassment, looking down at the floor as I continued my train of thought in silence whilst Shoji just chuckled at my blunder. I have a couple hours to think of a plan, and I'll have to take into account that I must talk to Shoji more than Izumi did with Ojiro, and Mina did with Ochako. Shoji, I think we should start planning. Shoto Pav. I kept my hands loose at my side, focusing on not only reaching my destination, not only studying the layout All Might had given us, but most importantly, breathing. I need to remain focused on said breathing so that I can handle the drop in temperature I plan to cause, as well as possible side effects if any. Even a slight misstep, or a single flinch could result in a blunder, and I absolutely refuse to allow myself to be humiliated like that recommended girl from before. Watching that match, the power deficit was clear, but the intelligence factor completely ruined her. The pink one made a Hail Mary that shouldn't have worked, but by Cammy's will, she completely outsmarted her by being simply stupid. The Viridian-haired recommended student allowed her ego and role to best her in the end, and didn't even bother to take the gravity girl out of the equation when she could. If she had, she could have won, but even then, her own intelligence seems to be lacking as well. I find it embarrassing that she of all people got into a school like this, let alone off recommendation, compared to someone like All Might, or even my father for crying out loud. It was humiliating to watch, and I don't plan failing like she did. I planned to prove to the High Council that they made the right choice to accept me, fire or no fire. My teammate Tokiyami remained silent as we walked side by side up the stairs of our building, honestly allowing me slight relief as at least he wasn't as strident as those loudmouthed girls who won the last match, but I still dreaded what he may say to my first words. Tokiyami, what I'm about to say isn't a suggestion, it is a fixed point in the future that I have already made up my mind on. Don't leave the bomb for a damn second, understood? He looked at me with confusion, raising an eyebrow at my remark. Why'd I need to do that? I hope you don't think me incapable. He replied with concern, staring daggers at me. That is not what I said. I simply think it would be best if you remained as the last line of defense. Trust me when I say that I have a plan that cannot possibly fail. Tokiyami stayed silent, seemingly assessing my words. Listen, I understand that you are capable to have gotten in via recommendation, but I got into this school just as well as you did. I deserve a chance to fig. I said it before, this isn't a suggestion. I replied, cutting him off. You saw what just happened to Yagi after she got cocky. There's no need to get a big HEA. Yagi is weak. I cut him off again, shutting his yap for a solid minute. She squandered such an easy victory because she wanted to make a spectacle. She could have tracked both of them, beaten both of them at once, yet she didn't out of simple love of theatrics. It's pathetic to consider her a fellow recommendee after that disgusting of a failure. After a moment of silence, Tokiyami simply nodded slowly and walked toward where we had decided to place the mock bomb. Those words I spilt out of my mouth to some may sound harsh, but I am simply trying to speak the truth. I am better than all of these people while only using half of my strength, and I can't help but find that sad. The fact I haven't found a proper rival truly offends me. Will I hurt people's feelings? Yes. If it means I can get out through their thick skulls that they need to bump it up a notch or two to be sure that the next generation will be protected and secure in the future. If they can't take harsh critique, then they for sure can't take on backlash, flesh wounds, and especially not villains. Izuku Pav. Well. That was harsh. Yes, his words hold truth and all, and I would be much angrier if it weren't directed at someone that wasn't Izumi, but he for sure has a superiority complex. All Might was listening through the comms, and I just so happened to hear it since he hadn't bothered to turn it down enough. Tokiyami just looked dejected, not wanting to fight his points any further, which to be fair, there is no arguing with a man set in his ways. I don't know the extent of Todoroki's power yet, but it must be immense since he made it in through recommendation along with Izumi. Sato and Aoyama look like they're finished with their prep, so the match will likely start within a minute or two. All Might soon pressed the button to start the countdown, looking at the floor in silence as the rest of the class looked at the screens. This will hopefully not go as poorly as the first match, because Todoroki is doing something similar to Izumi. Let's just hope he doesn't get in over his head. Shotopav. As the alarm finally blared out across the city, I walked out of the room that held the bomb, and then crafted a wall of ice to block the entrance, soon afterward freezing the entire hallway, as well as several other hallways to make sure that they wouldn't immediately find the right hall to break through, if they could get through one that was. Soon afterward, I placed my hand on the floor, and began to compulsively will ice into existence, creating a sheet that began to quickly spread across the floor and walls of the current hall I was in, and I willed it to spread across the entire building. Within 4 minutes, the building had been covered, and I could already hear the grunting and yelling from the fat-lipped opponent I was facing, clearly having been frozen to the floor. I walked over to my layers upon layers of ice guarding the bomb, realizing that this had been even easier than I thought previously, and willed the ice to open a pathway for me. As the ice split apart to form a path, I walked in with no fear, the ice quickly swirling and closing behind me. I eventually returned to the bomb room, finding Tokiyami still sitting next to the bomb, teeth chattering. What hell dddiduddo? He forced himself to ask, rubbing his arms desperately. I froze the damn building, what else? He simply looked at the floor in annoyance. Calm down, don't you want an easy victory? I asked, sitting down without feeling even a slight chill. And not like this. He replied angrily, rubbing his arms further. In all honesty, it didn't matter if he was happy or not. A victory is a victory, and that is that. I wonder how those Neanderthals are doing down there. Rikido POV. Not gonna lie Aoyama, we might be cooked. I relented to my teammate, who was hardly listening to me. Say Sato, wouldn't you say my reflection just looks dazzling in this ice? He asked with a sly grin. fawning over the cracked and wiggly reflection of his face in the ice. "Can you not just focus on our task for a few seconds at least?" I asked in desperation, finally yanking my leg out for the thick sheet of ice that encased me. "But it simply is too beautiful to resist. Do you not think so too? Look at me, it's stunning." I pinched the bridge of my nose with impatience. Embodiment of Narcissus in real time, ladies and gentlemen. I whisper to myself, eventually just grabbing him by his shoulders, and yanking him upward and out of the thinner sheet of ice that had him enraptured. "Come on already, we'll get zeros if we don't at least try. You can gawk at your reflection as we wall." Before I could finish my sentence, I slipped and fell flat on my face. As I lifted myself back up, I realized I had busted my lip. "Ooh goodness, are you perhaps alright?" Aoyama finally looked at something that wasn't his own reflection, and genuinely seemed concerned. "Yeah, I'm good. Let's just try and support each other. Balance is gonna be hell from here on out." I asked, hoping he would take me seriously. I suppose that would be the smartest plan of action. I apologize for spacing out. I nodded to him as he nodded to me, and we both placed one hand against a wall, leaning against each other, and waddling through the hall slowly but surely, positive that we would trip up again once we eventually would find the stairs. God, this is gonna be torture. Izuku Pav, 12 minutes later. It was a complete and utter washout. Sato was hindered by the fact he couldn't use his main factor, his strength, without being launched down the hall by the force amplified by the ice beneath his feet, and Aoyama, despite the fact he had started focusing at the drawing of blood, wasn't much of a help in the environment that they were given. There wasn't even a fight to be had, it was simply painful to watch. They weren't even given a chance to prove themselves, it was just a maze that they could hardly navigate, let alone find the right path toward the bomb. I bet Todoroki feels great right now after ruining everybody's days with one move. The alarm soon went off across the mock city, signaling that the round was over without even a single confrontation. "Young Todoroki, could you please melt away the ice covering the building?" All Might asked in a downtrodden tone. "Forgive me, All Might, but I will have to refuse." I could hear him say over the comms. "And why is that?" All Might asked with both confusion and annoyance. "I simply just refuse. I don't need to say anything further." I could see All Might grinding his teeth together as he struggled to keep his mouth shut. For once, I actually was on a similar wavelength to my father, which has only become more rare by the day. All Might soon turned around to look at the class, holding 4 new earpieces, 4 new rolls of capture tape, and 2 new sheets of a new building's layout. I knew I wasn't next, and I was just hoping that the next match would be less mind-numbing. "Tsuyu Asui, Kyoka Jiro, you two will be the heroes. Eijiro Kirishima, Toru Hagakure, you two will be the villains. Head off to plot 94D, and I'm begging you, don't ruin the building again." Okay, I don't know too much about Kirishima other than the fact he is very sociable, and that definitely isn't gonna help his case as a villain. You not only need to embrace the role, but also play it to perfection, both in execution and call to action. The other 3, I don't know anything about, except that one of them has a vision-based quirk that makes her look invisible. Invisibility is being able to be peered through like glass, but she seems to be simply reflecting light off of herself. Unique, and definitely useful, but I find it hard to see many scenarios in which the villains win if my predictions are right. As the 4 students begin walking away, the still mostly healthy pair of Sato and Aoyama return, looking absolutely humiliated. I can't bring myself to blame them for their loss, since Todoroki just did the asshole move, even harming his teammate with little to no care in the world for his health. I glanced away from them, and toward the screen, looking forward to the match that was about to begin, praying it would at least give me valuable insight into their styles, or capabilities outside of basic cardio. Kyoka Pav. I couldn't help but grin. I mean, why would I not be giddy? I could hear Toru bragging to her teammate about how she had the perfect stealth quirk, and I just happened to have the literal perfect counter in the form of my ears. "You seem confident, Jiro. What's up?" Sue asked with a tilt of her head. "Oh, nothing. Just have a really good plan to handle Toru." I gave her the brass tacks, sitting down outside the building we were given, and we both began to look over the map together. "Do you have a plan to deal with Kirishima? He's slower than us, so that is an advantage, but it's like an immovable object meeting rushing winds. He isn't gonna take damage, but we are definitely faster." I took her words into account, and began to think of a contingency for someone as defensive as him, until it hit me. His skin is rock solid, however. If you were to get past those defenses, then he is just as vulnerable as me. When I give you the signal, cover your ears with these. I say as I hand my partner some earplugs to put in place of her earpiece. I'll give you a 10-second warning so that you don't take too much damage. She nodded in response, a dopey grin adorning adorably goofy features. Anything I can do? She soon asked with curiosity. How good would you say you were at actual combat? She brought her hand up to her chin, clearly thinking about my question. I'm decent with takedowns, and great with kicks. The walls are useful to me as extra platforms, so that can increase the force I would assume. Just hearing her describe her combat style, I knew we had a great chance. Great, I'll tell you where Toru is, since I can tell by her footsteps and breathing that she isn't too big. You'll be able to take her if I can give you the play-by-play. I was genuinely excited for our match now. I knew it wouldn't be one-sided like the last two, but I knew it would be in our favor. Suyu Pav. 8 minutes later, me and Kyoka have been studying this map for ages, and Kirishima and Toru are somehow still not ready yet. I don't get what's going on up there, but I just want to get this over with. Kirishima Pav. Steady, 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 steady. I had used my full body to leap in and catch the bomb, as Hagakure just couldn't be bothered to put an effort to help me lift this heavy-ass thing. Come on, Hagakure. I can't do this by myself. Can you please at least put in a bit of effort? I begged with desperation. In case you didn't notice, I'm almost completely naked. I ain't letting my body touch that thing. It could be covered in who knows what kind of germs. She complained incessantly, making me groan. Not my fault you are a seminudist germaphobe who decided to join the messiest business on the damn planet. Suck it up and help your damn team. I protested with annoyance, not wanting to be immediately messed up by my teammate and her sloppy teamwork. I am helping. You just can't do the work that I refuse to do, so don't go blaming me for your mistakes. Also, I'm not a nudist. I didn't really care about her deflection of the insult. I was just fed up with her reluctance. Just do it, plain and simple. It is not that hard to just support weight. I continued to drag the unconventionally shaped fake bomb up the stairs, Hagakure simply watching, and tugging at her gloves as if she wasn't gonna take them off the moment the alarm went off. I already was fed up with her BS, and just wanted this damn fight to end before it even began, because she was fucking obnoxious. I finally managed to get the bomb into a secure location. My legs were shaking from the lack of balance. See? You didn't need my help there, you're fine? Hagakure prattled on again and again, giving me what felt like a headache. I clicked a button on my earpiece, and called back to all might. We're ready. Without a moment's notice, without a plan, and without many options, the alarm timer began to tick down. Okay. You stay here, asshat. I'll go mess them up, they won't see me coming, she demanded, punching her palm. No, you need to stay close to the bomb. I'm a defensive tank. They won't be able to do shit, but if they hit you 1t, bold of you to assume that they will. Our arguing gained us no progress, and before we knew it, the timer was up, and the alarm blared through our ears. As that happened, I decided to just pass her by, and run down the stairs before she could protest. As I booked it down the hall as fast as I could hear a second set of footsteps right beside me. I looked to my side, and couldn't see her baby blue boots, or her gloves, but when I turned to look back, I could see her boots and gloves discarded on the ground. YUW, what the F fuck are you doing? Someone needs to be guarding the bomb, I yelled at her as I ran, hearing her bare yet loud footsteps beating against the ground. Then go protect it, Mr. Combat Specialist. I could only grit my teeth and keep running as fast as I could, hoping that the two of us could just overpower Jiro and Asui, and be done with it. Yet something tells me that that will not be the case. Suyu Pav. Kyoka had to cover her ears for a bit because the alarm was quite loud, but nevertheless we made our way in with minimal difficulty. Hell, in all honesty, I don't even think Kyoka needed her super hearing to hear the two of them arguing from a mile away. Are they both coming down? Kyoka soon asked as she took her hands off of her ears. Yep, sounds about right. I replied curtly, remaining focused on running. If they were both coming, then that would make this even easier. Now we don't even have to beat them, all we have to do is get past them, and maybe let someone hold them off? I'm faster than all three of them, so I would probably be the best bet. I tapped Kyoka on the shoulder, and motioned for her to stop. I began to whisper in her ear, since we had stopped being able to hear Kirishima and Toru, and didn't want to take any chances. If I can get past them, then we win by default. I'm faster than them, and can get to the bomb. Kyoka's eyes widened, and she began to nod in understanding. Okay, back to running. I say, squatting down and beginning to hop forward as fast as I could, yet slowing down a bit to allow for Kyoka to keep up. Our chances just keep getting better by the moment. Kirishima Pav. I stopped running eventually, not only to catch my breath, but also because I had found my vantage point. After watching Uraraka's match, her high ground advantage made it an uphill battle for Yagi, so what about me being a defensive wall is different than that rubble other than the excessive mass? Why the hell are you stopping? The invisible girl asked with confusion. I found my post. You go forward and meet them at the middle, stop them if you can. I requested, breathing heavily. And why would I do duh? Because you want to fucking win, right? Then do what you fucking signed up for. The girl eventually scoffed, and ran down the stairs reluctantly. And try to keep your footsteps quiet. I called out to her, but to no response. She'd better not throw the damn game away. Kyoka Pav. I was keeping close focus on my ears, waiting to hear anything worth noticing every second of every step I took, and eventually I picked something up. Sue was a bit further ahead, and I didn't want to yell out to her, so I clicked my comms. Sue, can you hear me? I asked, soon getting to watch Sue stop hopping, and click her comm. Yep, did you hear something? She asked with slight concern, as I held up a hand, motioning for her to wait. I got down on one knee, and extended the jacks from my ears down to the floor, stabbing it into the concrete. I listened closely for any sounds I didn't recognize, and eventually locked onto my target. An invisible girl who doesn't understand what the fuck is happening. She is going on her tippy toes, yet she still makes enough noise for me to notice her, not to mention her breathing. Sue, take 3 steps backward. As I tell her to do so, she nods to me, symbolizing her trust in my hearing. Sue took a few steps back, and I could tell that Hagakure was confused by her muscular movements, an expression of confusion that I could barely read from here. Stay. There. She stopped moving completely as I told her to, her gaze not leaving my eyes. Eventually, I could tell that Hagakure was getting bored, eventually just starting to walk towards Sue, her expression of annoyance now much more readable. Sue. When I give you the signal, you are going to turn around, and she will be right behind you. Do what you do best, and beat her ass. I'll get her with the capture tape once you've restrained her. She nods, waiting for my signal. Eventually, Hagakure screws the quiet, and begins to fully run at Sue from behind, only mere feet away. Turn. Within an instant, Sue spun on her heel, and delivered a backward heel kick straight to Hagakure's temple, knocking her out instantly as she fell to the floor. My eyes were popping out of their sockets, and my jaw had fallen into the void. I hadn't expected her to do something that professional. What the hell did you? Taekwondo was my starter, and I just got interested in kicking from there. My legs are naturally stronger, so it worked out. She spoke deadpan, not breaking her gaze from where Hagakure lay unconscious. Oh. Okay. I replied, not knowing how to respond. I quickly ran over, and tied up her wrists with the capture tape, and with a nod from Sue, we went back to running, having wasted a good bit of time already, and still having a bomb to touch. Suyu Pav. Hagakure went down a lot easier than I thought she would, but come to think of it, she seemed like the city girl type, and whenever she and I talked, she sure as hell wasn't professional. Maybe, she doesn't have experience. Either way, it doesn't matter, as Kirishima is still standing, and he wasn't with her. We eventually reached the final staircase, and at the top, there was the shark-toothed saint himself. What? Did Hagakure not manage to beat either of you? He asked in shock. No time for words. Kyoka spat quickly, making the correct choice as to not waste more time. Sue, can you leap over him? She whispered, preparing something that looked like a speaker on her calf, connecting her earphone jacks to them. Of course I can. I replied curtly. Then do it, I'll give you a 6-second head start, she exclaimed, turning up a dial. Within that instant, I hopped up 8 steps, and then leapt the rest of the way over Kirishima, evading his grasp with minimal issue, and began to sprint hop. I don't even know what to call what I do at this point. Fuck. Hey, get backy. Before he could finish his sentence, a large sound wave blasted up the stairs, forcing Kirishima against a wall that slowly began to crack around him. Damn. was the only word I could utter at the sheer force that Kyoka of all people could display. If she had asked me to get out of the way, she could have just decked Toru earlier. Maybe it has an inhibition? Well, I could ask her about it later. At the moment, I was running. I soon turned a corner, and found the room that contained the bomb. I could hear Kirishima having finally been let go of the sound wave, and sprinting toward me. I placed my hand on the bomb, winning the match, but as the alarm rang, Kirishima skidded past the room, his shoes squeaking across the floor. Fuck. Good game, Suyu. As Kirishima's competitive brain turned itself off, so also did his life support, as he fell to the floor, beaten and tired. Kyoka soon skidded around the corner, and looked at my hand on the bomb. "Oh, hell yeah. That was tight as fuck," she exclaimed excitedly, pumping her fists into the air. One of the few genuine smiles of hers that I've seen appeared on her face, making me smile as well. "That sound wave thing was amazing, Kyoka. He might have actually caught up to me if not for that blast, so thanks for the amazing help," I said, walking over and giving her a hug. "Hey, we wouldn't have made such good time if not for the kick, and you were definitely fast enough," she complimented me back, earning a giggle. "Oh yeah, that blast thing isn't something I can do often, since the speakers I have aren't strong enough yet. These have already been busted up," she exclaimed, motioning to her calves which were now bare for the most part. "Well, I'm sure you'll be able to use it again soon, because if you can, you are gonna be unstoppable." She grinned at me from ear to ear. "I hope so." We both soon turned around, and looked at the unconscious Kirishima, and with a nod, we both walked over, and helped him back up onto his feet. Izuku Pav. Well, Hagakure completely sold it for Kirishima. Their arguing obviously isn't just her fault and all, but she was the primary aggressor each time, and left most of the heavy lifting to Kirishima. That incoordination pit against the almost perfect synergy of Asui and Jiro was a nightmare waiting for them to go to sleep. The whole fight with Hagakure, or rather, standoff with Hagakure, showed their immense trust in one another, and also Hagakure's impatience and lack of experience, even compared to others who are inexperienced as hell. Kirishima put up a good fight, and took some advice from the first fight, but his opponents were vastly different from the ones Ochako and Mina defeated, so the plan didn't work as well as it could have. If Kirishima had been paired with someone like Sato, then maybe things would have been different, but that's simply luck of the draw. In other news, I know for a fact that my fight is next, so I've been focusing on breathing, and calming my nerves. Shoji has been keeping quiet too, which only after a couple hours of knowing him, it just doesn't seem like him. His eyes were locked onto the bracket as he tugged on his face mask. I set a hand on his shoulder, and patted him a couple times to be sure that he was good. Without a word, he flinched, and turned to look at me. He nodded in silence, beginning to focus on breathing as well. I could feel the piercing glare in the back of my head, and knew exactly what was coming. All Might soon cleared his throat, and turned around to look at us. "Midoriya, Shoji, Bakugo, Yaoyorozu, it is time." Izuku Pav. As I gazed up that tall building before me, what would normally be a pretty average sight soon seemed to loom over me, a feeling of dread I recognized all too well. I felt like fainting, but I kept my eyes open. I felt my legs shake, yet my body remained standing. And despite all these things that I felt, and everything that I knew, of myself, of my strength, of my power unknown at everyone around me, I still felt afraid of the mad dog that I knew was waiting for me inside, foaming at the mouth and ready to let out a bunch of his pent-up stress. I soon snapped my neck back down, and began to stare at the ground beneath my feet, contemplating whether I should even be doing this. I get that I'm capable, I get that I have the power of the king, but right now, I feel like I always have. Like nothing more than a peasant. But when I think like that, I begin to remind myself of all those times I felt just like this. The scars on my back, the sore throats from my incessant screaming, the cuts across and down my arms, and the bloodied bandages that I have grown oh so accustomed to. But the thing that stuck out through it all was that smile. That damned smile. He laughed, and cackled, and taunted me every day relentlessly, as if it were a part of his daily routine, and he would die if he didn't. He saw it as if it were a service, to him, to the school, to me. And when I think of these things, I get that same anger in my head, all over again. Every time I think these things, I get the urge to beat him down, to hurt him, to crush him until he understands what the fuck he did to me, and to everyone around him. I want to see him hurt, I want to see him cry, I want him to feel horrible, and beg for me to leave him alone, just like I did all those years ago. I want to defeat him, beyond a shadow of a doubt. Maybe then, he will shut the fuck up, sit down, and leave me the fuck out of his miserable life. And I have more than one way for me to get to him, whether it be through anger, or through tears. Mazo, there are some things you should know about Bakugo. You mind if I give the brass tacks? I asked, to which he nodded, intent on victory. He is the type to cast caution to the wind, and immediately run into the danger. Not because he wants to save anyone, just because he sees someone he can justify hurting. He is fast, experienced, and hates nobody in the world more than he hates me. He will likely ignore you completely, and focus on just hurting me. When he comes to face me, you will run past him, and go straight to the top. Yaoyorozu is inexperienced from what I can tell from how much of a perfectionist she is. She doesn't have a realistic outlook on combat, and will not expect a brute force assault. She will set up some sort of defense, but your arms will break through them quickly, as she doesn't have the stamina to make too many overtly durable structures, let alone ones of meaningful size without lunch in her system. He nodded along intently, seemingly understanding everything quite well. How do you know all of this? He soon asked me, curiosity in his eyes. I look back in my memory, reminding myself of one of my few uses of Geass, receiving all the information I needed from an unaware Yaoyorozu. Not a waste, since I can just use it on her again if I want, but I needed an explanation. She simply told me when I asked. She thought it unfair that I was quirkless, fighting a quirk I never even got to see. A foolish blunder. Well, that was a mistake and a half. What about Bakugo though? He asked, to which I scoffed. He sweats nitroglycerin, and can create explosions in the palms of his hands. Excessive use can cause similar symptoms to dehydration, blood loss, and occasionally starvation. However, his will is stronger than his hubris, and unless you can break his focus, then he will never stop until he is either unconscious, the victor, or dead in the dirt. I relented my excessive knowledge, remembering well the abuse that he was used to dealing and how he dealt it. All right. So he comes down, fights you, and I get to go mop the floor with Yaoyorozu. Are you sure that that'll wo? It will. I know Bakugo too damn well to be wrong here. I cut him off, resolute in my resolve. All right. I'm trusting you here, man. And if all does go to plan, I wish you luck with Bakugo. I nodded to my teammate, and whipped out the building layout, finding the fastest route to the top within a matter of minutes. Me and Shoji continued to go over the exact plan of action for several more minutes, until eventually Bakugo and Yaoyorozu had placed their bomb. Me and Shoji nodded to each other one more time, solidifying our plan, and our agreement on our readiness. As the same screen from the other matches came out of the ground, the timer began to tick down. I was ready. I just hope that Bakugo is too. Katsuki Pav. Guard the bomb, don't leave the room unless it's to defend the fort, or to look out for a threat. Deku's mine. I spoke at Ponytail with vigor, not in the mood for an argument. But Bakugo, surely you understand, duh. Shut the fuck up and stay here, or I swear to God I'll ask for you to join their team down there, underfucking stood? I asked with snark in my tone, grinding my teeth already. She quickly shut her fucking yap, and I could finally hear myself think. The countdown was ticking away, and I hadn't been this excited in years. The school of my dreams is willingly going to let me beat the ever-loving fuck out of the disgusting bastard Deku, and I'll get graded on it? With his dad watching too? Oh man? I'm gonna have fun with this? Izuku Pav. As the timer finally hit 0, I began to sprint, Mezzo closely following. I could already faintly hear the sound of his explosions approaching from beyond the separate floors. Knowing him, he would definitely go for a surprise attack, but I already had a flashbang in hand. As we turned a corner, I could already smell a slight scent of smoke. A scent I recognize all too well. I reached my arm out, signaling for Shoji to stop, as I soon afterward jogged up close to the corner. As I got close, Bakugo immediately pounced into the air, intent on attacking me, but as his limbs left his body open, I flashbanged him directly in the chest, leaving him groaning on the floor. Shoji! Go! As I yelled, Shoji ran right past us while I stepped back, away from the rabid dog. He lifted himself back up, using his knuckles in a position similar to that of a push-up, and he had his teeth gritted in the form of a grin. Hey! Looks like you grew some balls, Deku. He called to me from across the hall. I'm not afraid of you anymore, Bakugo. I'm the strongest I've ever been. You won't best me so easily, never again. I remark with a scowl, taking out my batons and turning on the taser function. Your toys won't do shit against me. He roared with velocity, rearing back his arm and launching an explosion my way, forcing me to run toward him, dodging meanwhile. As he threw another one, he began running toward me as I ran. I dodged the attack, and continued running, jumping into the air, gaining airtime, and already prepared for his right hook, using my own right arm to get him in the throat with my baton. His fist grazed the side of my head, and left me a bit rattled as I rolled to my feet while landing, but I couldn't let him get range or composure, so I went back in for seconds, throwing one of my batons, nailing him right in the forehead, and rushing in myself, getting him in the jaw with a knee. He is well versed with his quirk, but in actual combat, I have a drastic edge. He eventually regained composure, and let out a blast on my back as I was close enough to call it hugging distance. I was more than used to the feeling, and could take it relatively well with the protective suit I wore, and rolled away temporarily, rushing back in immediately, getting him with a right hook to the jaw. I was focused mainly on his head, because once he is disoriented, then he would lose focus. Then, if necessary, I would go into my phase 2. He eventually caught my incoming left hook, and blasted me away with his left hand. I caught myself as I tumbled back, and flipped back onto my feet, throwing another flashbang right at him. He had since then stopped talking, clearly focused on the fight a bit too much for someone he considers to be his inferior, so I decided to just go into phase 2 for fun. So Bakugo, how's your mom doing if you don't mind me asking? I ask in a taunting manner, a grin adorning my face as I dodged a blind explosion, caught myself, and kicked him around the shoulder, knocking him back as he shot himself away. The fuck you wanna know about that hag? She isn't in my life anymore, and that's all I've ever wanted, he yelled, clearly confused, and putting on a front. Oh, well that's a real shame. She's been a big part of my life for a long time. And an even bigger one now, I jested with a grin, unclear because my mask hid it well. He landed a close-range explosion on my side, but the angle wasn't doing him any favors, as it gave my body momentum to spin around and counter with something reminiscent of a clothesline. The fuck you talking about, Deku? He yelled at me, propelling himself forward and around with his explosions, landing a relatively sloppy, yet still quite strong spinning kick onto my forearm while I blocked. See, if you talked to the woman, you would know exactly what I mean, because my role is pretty damn big nowadays, in both her life, and her role in mine, I muse, rolling him up as I parried his kick completely, jumped back, only to rush right back in while he was falling. As he landed, I went in for another right hook, only for him to barely catch it and hit me over the head, seconds later blasting me twice with both of his hands. You were just trying to distract me, aren't you? That's only gonna make this even more painful for ya. He roared with a malicious grin, blasting forward as I dodged to the side. He rolled to his feet as he landed, but before he could get back his momentum, I textbook Goldberg speared the ever-living fuck out of him, straight into one of the walls. Okay, maybe not textbook, because my head hurt a bit afterward, but not enough to disorient me. I realized I had forgotten about my baton, and began to crack it against his ribs, kneeing him while he slammed my back relentlessly, going full caveman brain and forgetting he had a quirk. Oh, why you think I'm lying? Well what does this mean then? My question, laced with anger, had meaning, as I slammed him in the jaw with my singlet-hand baton, and then threw a little picture in his face. I knew it would take him a few seconds to figure it out, so I ran to pick up my previously discarded baton. What the fuck is this? He asked, eyes widened, pupils shaking. That's me and your mom. See, she's not been having the easiest time since you went ahead and tossed her aside like a used wrapper for the tool that is yourself. So she's been coming to spend time with my mom, not only to help mom through her divorce, but for my mom to help her through hers. As I went on, Katsuki's face continued to contort in both pain, annoyance, confusion, and a form of disgust, and I knew I had him hook, line, and sinker. Let's just say that we have gotten much closer than I would have expected I would. So I wanted to thank you, despite all the shit you've done, the shit you've said. I'm grateful for this opportunity, Bakugo. The photo was one we took during the whole confession fiasco at the gym. Mitsuki had been the most clingy, and had specifically asked for me to show it to Katsuki. That may not sound so good for a mother to do, but I couldn't help but be entertained, since she was technically no longer in his life, just like Bakugo had said. Speaking of, his hands began to let off sparks, clearly seeing a mixture of black, white, and red through his once rose-tinted glasses. The woman who brought him into the world had moved on, and found a different life, and she looked happier than ever. He incinerated the picture in his hands with a flashy explosion, and I couldn't help but grin. I knew he was about to hurt me, but that wouldn't save him. I had already won in spirit, and I was still going to hurt him a whole lot worse than what he was going to. He let out an intangible scream of anger and tears, blasting his way toward me with malicious intent, only for me to slide under his grasp and flashbang his chest into the ceiling, and rolling back to my feet as he dropped. He let out a barrage of blind explosions, the ones connecting doing hefty damage, but thankfully, his anger fueled him far more than his actual mind. You have no fucking right to do that shit with my mother. How fucking dare you, quirkless sack of shit. He screamed bloody murder, becoming more inaccurate by the second, only making the situation even funnier. Fuck it. I don't give a fuck anymore. You're dead, you sack of shit. As he yelled, he reached for one of his gauntlets, and grabbed hold of the pin. Well, I think I might have jinxed myself. A humongous explosion similar to that of a primed gas bomb began to blaze down the hall straight toward me, forcing me to retreat to a corner. My back was almost incinerated, but it only received second-degree burns since I was mostly out of the radius of the blast, but it would have killed me instantly if I wasn't fast enough. What's the matter, Bakugo? Your ego can't handle being inferior, huh? I taunted further, my fear being bested by my enjoyment. I watched him get off the comms, with either All Might or Yaoyorozu, and he was already seething, but now I could see the cracks in his eyes. All those years of making me your punching bag, all those years that you and Izumi ruined my few happy moments. All those times when Dad looked at you while ignoring me. Your mother helped me through all of it, as well as my own. How dare you say I don't have a right when you never loved her in the first place? He impulsively threw another explosion at me, but I ducked back behind the corner and threw out a smoke pellet. He quickly blasted the smoke away, but I had managed to slip by him and crack him in the face with my batons again, only for me to take a hit to the chest, blasting me back. You are a freak. A hero wannabe. You shouldn't even have your mom in your corner. You people are fucking delusional. He yelled in response, blasting forward. As he rocketed toward me, I connected my batons into a staff, and gained the range to rock him in the teeth as he flew past me. You make me fucking sick. He roared again, flinging another explosion right past me, not even forcing me to dodge. His legs were beginning to shake, and he was breathing heavily. I had won. I began to walk over to him as he began to look at his gloved palms, confused of what was happening. No. No. No 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 no. He yelled desperately, flinging a few more explosions, only for me to simply duck and dodge, barely moving. It got to the point where I could deflect certain ones with my staff, and I couldn't help but laugh to myself. What the foo? What the fuck did you do? He begged, running in for a punch, only for his legs to give out, causing him to fall at my feet. He tried and failed to force himself back up, as I crouched down, and tied up his weak wrists with the capture tape. I'll tell you exactly what I did. I lived the life that made me happy, and made others happy. But I made you unhappy. Consequently, that resulted in the next big thing I did. And that was whooping your ass. I stood back up and clicked my earpiece as Bakugo struggled at the restraints. Shoji, how are things going up there? Mesopov. Pretty damn well on my end, Midoriya. Yaoyorozu is simply reusing the same tricks again and again, like when you take too long on a boss and it starts repeating stages. I chuckled to myself giddily as I watched her scramble. I was expecting to at least struggle, but it's like learning the attack patterns of Soul's bosses, only much easier. She was panting, and clearly malnourished to the point that I was concerned, but if I broke character, then that would deduct points. That's good. Make sure to beat her soon though, we don't want her getting hurt too badly. If we were real heroes, we would be trying to defeat the villains with as few casualties as possible, villains included. I couldn't help but laugh at his remark. Buddy, you do realize I heard you yelling and shit with Bakugo, right? You kept your calm on the whole time. As I told him that, he started to stutter and I could hear the slap against his forehead for miles. By the way, nice job in bagging his mom. That is the ultimate foo, I jested with glee, his sighs fueling my laughter. Eventually I got sick of waiting, and just decided to start moving toward her faster. I extended multiple arms her way, 3 of them disarmed her of her makeshift staff, and the others wrapped her arms up in capture tape. Yaoyorozu has been captured, I'm approaching the bomb now. Nice, Bakugo has been restrained, that means we should be home free, we still have a few minutes. Despite the fact that the fight on my end was hardly as explosive as the one I got to hear, it was still nerve-wracking to fight at all. Not to mention that she wasn't at her best, and her tactical mindset is incredibly hard to predict. If she had been full with food, then she could have very well beaten me, but it could go either way. As I walked down the hall that Yaoyorozu was so desperately defending, I soon found the bomb. Placing my hand on the bomb, I immediately afterward heard the alarm blare out, signaling our victory. Yet one sound rang out in my ears a lot louder than the alarm. An explosion from my earpiece. Izuku hadn't turned it off still. What the hell was happening? I ran down the hall and found the still restrained Yaoyorozu, who had seemingly heard it from her position in the hall. I thought that the round was over. She spoke with confusion, breathing heavily after our match. Before I could respond, I heard yet another explosion from downstairs. I began to quickly untie Yaoyorozu and helped her to her feet. Without a word, we both began to run as fast as our broken bodies would carry us. Katsuki Pav. That runt dropped his fucking guard. He thought it was okay to drop his guard? Around ME? Has he learned nothing? His back was exposed from my previous gauntlet use, so his stupid suit wasn't gonna save him anymore. His adrenaline has run out, and his teammate is far gone. So, you thought you could do that shit to me? Get away with ruining my flawless victory streak and get away with it? God. You are even more stupid than I fucking remembered, I yelled with a toothy grin, blasting him as he tried to crawl away again, hearing him scream out just like the good, old days. Ah, all out of tricks? No more family talks? Come on, bring up that bitch again, I fucking dare you. I am above you. I am better than you. You were never going to be better than me at anything, I blasted him again, only this time he didn't scream, only grunting. His back was charred, fleshy, and glistening in sweat and blood, a sight I was far too used to seeing. Why wouldn't this pussy just die already? I brought back my hand to blast him again, staggering as I moved, but during that brief moment of hesitation, my wrist was grabbed by a strong hand. I turned around, expecting All Might, but who I did include All Might, who hadn't made his presence known, but he didn't grab my hand. Who did was that masked guy with all those disgusting arms. His eyes were squinted in anger, and he clearly had a bone to pick, but I wasn't all too interested. Get your disgusting ass grubby hands off of him. Before I could say anything, he yanked my whole body toward him, and the last thing I saw before everything went black for a bit was that guy's fist. All Might Pav. I was absolutely mortified. The boy I had seen as a son, who I had mentored, and raised because of his strong will to become a hero, had just brutally mauled my son right in front of me. Izuku would always say that he and Izumi would do this to him often, but I couldn't bring myself to believe him. Why couldn't I then? But why? Am I thinking about it now? No, that isn't what matters at this exact moment. My son is bleeding profusely and needs to get to Recovery Girl. I blip over to him, and pick him up in my arms. He was still conscious, barely, but he was stable. The things he had said about, and to young Bakugo simply seemed too real to not take into account. And if that is the case, what of Izumi? The fight of hers that I watched was not of the Izumi that I raised, I'm sure of it. Or rather, I thought I was. Get him to Recovery Girl already. Young Shoji pleaded desperately, with young Yaoyorozu close behind him, seemingly horrified at the sight of Izuku's state. I myself couldn't bear to even smile, my hands clenched in anger at myself for not having stopped the fight before it got out of hand. I could only bring myself to nod as I then blitzed my way to the office of Recovery Girl, breaking the sound barrier several times over. I was disgusted with my negligence, of my students, of my family, of my son, and duties as a father. And judging from his outburst earlier today, I'm far from innocent myself. Good Lord. I'm such a failure. Mesopov. I wanted to hurt him. I wanted to make him suffer. That was the biggest dick move I have ever seen. Breaking the rules just to attack an unaware guy whose life you've already fucked up enough. I've barely heard anything about his life, yet it's all been shit because of him. I clenched my fists, wanting to hit him hard, but I decided not to in the end. I would not be like that bastard. Yeah, the mom thing is kind of a dick move, but I consider that to be living his best life, and optimal BM. I'm assuming that the last match will be postponed? Yaoyorozu asked, to which I nodded with uncertainty. Yeah. I don't think I've ever seen All Might's smile fall before. I was haunted by the sight of Izuku's body. He could have been killed there, because of how selfish that bastard was. Serenity now, Mezzo, serenity now. I forced myself not to think about the day-ruining events of this fight, not wanting to be angry anymore. As me and Yaoyorozu left the building, we passed a medical droid that was likely going to pick up Bakugo. I couldn't even bring myself to crack a joke at this time. It was simply just too much too soon. Tenya. The last match we were put through was nothing short of horrific, out of embarrassment for Bakugo, and fear for Midoriya's safety. Yes, me and him have argued, and we haven't gotten along so far, but my intention was never to make myself seem so shallow. Bakugo went far beyond the bounds that limited a hero, just for a petty squabble. Okay, maybe there was a bit of petty on both sides, but from what it seemed, Midoriya was the one mostly in the right here. And even if he weren't, even if he was the worst of the worst, nobody deserves that kind of a beating. Nevertheless, despite my turmoil over the situation, All Might returned a bit ago, and sanctioned the final match to start. I hadn't expected him to even entertain the idea after watching his smile drop lower than low, but it seems I will still get a chance to prove myself. As I was thinking to myself, I took a glance at my teammate, Kaminari, noticing that he had zoned out all over again, just like this morning. I had tried to pester him during class before we were brought outside, but it was almost as if he hadn't even noticed I was there. I just let out a sigh and began to look over the layout and try to think on how we could possibly win, or rather, the possibility that I would have to fight alone. I soon turned back to Kaminari, swallowing my pride, and lowering my tone a bit. Kaminari, would you mind if I asked if you were alright? I questioned with slight concern, reaching to put a hand on his shoulder, only for him to flinch from the sudden contact, and prepare an electric attack to throw my way. I fell to the ground in shock, and looked up at Kaminari with confusion and fear. Meanwhile, the look in his eyes did not display the emotion I was expecting. All I could see within his eyes were the very same emotions I was feeling at that very moment. Confusion, fear, and anger. Ooh, sorry about that. Why, you just startled me. He began to ramble in desperation as I could only breathe a sigh of annoyance and relief. Would you mind not blacking out on me any further? I plan to at least have a chance at victory, and don't need you squandering it. I berated him angrily, losing any sort of restraint as I stood back up and dusted off my now dirtied armor. Oh, fuck off, it was an accident. Not like I ever said I was gonna be perfect immediately. Be you. Save it. I don't need your incessant yammerings in my ear on the one day I get to prove my worth. So please just shut your trap and focus on the damn assignment, alright? I scolded him further, cutting him off without hesitation. I have a right to be nerve. Zip. I raised my voice to cut him off again, getting in his face a bit, my patience on its last legs. He clicked his tongue in frustration and walked over to the building, leaning against it with his foot tapping on the ground. I went back to researching possible strategies for the match, but none of them really seemed likely unless I got extremely lucky, since a certain teammate can't focus, and can't keep himself in line for more than 5 minutes. The only reason why there is a chance is because one of them can literally do nothing, since there aren't any animals around. I just have to hope that they are struggling up there as much as I am down here. Hanta Pav. Alright, I'm gonna ask you a few questions, and since you don't like talking, just nod or shake your head to them, alright? I asked nervously as Koda nodded quickly. Okay. Do you have any skill in combat of any sort, professional training? Anything like that? He shook his abnormally shaped head, seemingly not processing what he had just said. Okay. Are you capable with math? Are there any animals that you can reach? Is there anything you can do right now? Again, he said no to all of the questions, begging the final one. Okay. Don't take this the wrong way, buddy. But how the fuck did you get into UA if you literally can't do anything? He innocently shrugged his shoulders, looking at me like a confused puppy. I pinched the bridge of my nose and began to groan. We're so screwed, it ain't even funny. Tenya Pav. The alarm had started to tick down much more quickly than I would have thought it would, and I was slightly unprepared. I shot up to my feet, and began to do some last-minute stretches. Kaminari was simply standing still, waiting for the alarm to blare out across the city. If I could just run past everyone, get to the bomb, and touch it, nobody would see that coming. I'm faster than literally everyone in the class, It is simply impossible that I could be bested with this plan. Not even Kaminari could mess this up. As the alarm struck 0, I bolted into the building as fast as I could, skidding down the halls with each turn. I was confident that nobody could stop me when I was as fast as I am, and continued to bolt down the hall without restraint. This was my best chance. Hanta Pav. I could already hear the thunderous rapid footsteps of Iida blitzing down the hall, but I knew that would happen. I waited around a corner. A bit of my tape stuck to the very corner, just to where it couldn't be seen from his side. I soon heard him enter the hall right next to mine, so I slipped around the corner, yanking my tape out, and nailing him right in the neck. My tape was surprisingly thick enough to stop him, so I yanked him down to the floor, and nailed him in the teeth with the hardest punch I could throw. While he was dazed, I tied up his arms and legs, and started to try and catch my breath. No. No way. Iida seemed dumbfounded and mortified as I just tried to slow down a bit. Holy fuck, no way. Ha 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 ha. I did it. I began to cheer to myself giddily, ripping off the strands of tape that were left in my elbows, and continued to celebrate my victory. But suddenly, something dawned on me. Where the fuck is Kaminari? Hanta Pav. I skidded around the corner, and desperately sprinted to the bomb, fearing the worst, only to find Kota unconscious and buzzing on the floor. I desperately ran into the room with the bomb, and found Kaminari standing still in front of the bomb. I ran over to him as he remained dormant, and socked him in the face, then used my tape to restrain his arms, yank him back over to me, and slam him to the floor. My skin felt a bit dry after all that, and after all that running I had been doing, I was dead tired, but then I looked at Kaminari's face, and oh my god, I fucking couldn't contain my laughter for even a second. As the alarms rang out to signal me and Kota's victory, I could only laugh at the hilarity of me having to do literally everything myself. I don't know what happened while I was gone, but I can only guess that Kaminari did something reckless and stupid. Oh well, a win's a win. Shoto Pav. The last match was nothing short of underwhelming and pathetic. 0 had to do literally everything whilst Kota just got eviscerated by an overexertion of power that also ended up incapacitating its own damn user. Iida went in guns blazing, and got completely bodied within 5 fucking seconds. The fact that a quirkless kid is making us all look like dog shit is fucking embarrassing. How did these Neanderthals even manage to get out of bed this morning, knowing that they were this horrifically stupid? 0 was at least capable and smart enough to win the 2 versus 1, but in the end, it was just a 5-second 1 versus 1, that was completely one-sided. None of them are even close to being worth my time except for maybe 3 people. 0. Yaoyorozu, Midoriya. Okay, maybe Shoji as well, but I still feel as if they don't have a real chance against me. They simply intrigue me. And I swear, if that Bakugo brat killed Midoriya, I'm going to be fucking livid. He is the only one other than me with simple raw talent, and I hate to watch that stuff die so pathetically. Kyoka Pav. Everyone who believes that they have been injured to the point where further classes would be painful, head down to Recovery Girl's office. Get yourselves fixed up, and as soon as you can, return to class at once. We will go over the match recordings tomorrow when everyone is back in action. All Might said, a clearly forced smile on his heavy-hearted face, before sprinting away faster than the eye could see. I mean, who could really blame him? That Midoriya kid almost just fucking died under his watch, and he did next to nothing for a solid few minutes. Not to mention that this could be counted as a hate crime against the quirkless populace, so that is a potential lawsuit, and crushing blow to not only UA, but All Might as well. He's got a shit ton to be upset over, so I understand completely where he's coming from. Not condoning it obviously, but you get my point, right? Over half of the students began to trudge over to the medical bay, damaged or broken limbs, crutches, bloodshot eyes, everyone got the works. But then me and Sue over here are completely untouched. All we could do was shrug and walk back to the classroom. I felt worried for everyone's health obviously, but I like to go by the philosophy of a personal favorite song of mine. Worry later, be happy now. Don't worry, be happy. Yeah, it's literally just me gaslighting myself into not feeling sad, but it's how I live, damn it, don't judge me. Percival Pav. Present day, back at the lunch cafeteria.
I found it hard not to seethe under my breath as I was told of the day's events. If I would have known then maybe, no, even if I knew beforehand, I wouldn't jump in to save his ass. I feel bad for him, don't get me wrong, but he made the choice to come here. He knew the risk, and knew that that Bakugo kid was going to be here from how often he brought him up before the first day.
Can't say I didn't see that coming when it comes to the hero course, but I'll still give my grievances for the pain. I relented solemnly, giving a nod of acknowledgement to the three girls. Hey, Ochako is the one who took the bigger beating. I just ran and cowered in a corner like a baby, and just happened to get lucky that my teammate was as badass as her. Mina admitted, looking down with a solemn smile. Don't feel too bad, at least your teammate didn't almost kill someone because he got a bit too upset that he lost. Yaoyorozu said, trying to comfort Mina. Well, I would speak on my own hard times. If I had any. Kyoka chimed in, grinning cheekily as Mina and Yaoyorozu looked at her with condemning expressions. Come to think of it, Percy, what is your quirk? We told you ours, and I still don't even know yours. I felt like slapping myself in the forehead for how dumb of a mistake that was. It's a form of pyrokinesis, or pyromanipulation, and a general bodily enhancement. Reflexes, strength, speed, endurance, the whole kit. They all looked at me and nodded, before Yaoyorozu, again, just had to chime in with a question. Then how come you aren't in the hero course? Someone with a quirk that overwhelmingly positive would surely make a fine hero, wouldn't you think? Kyoka cringed at that remark as I sighed in annoyance. It isn't for me, all there is to it. I replied curtly, closing my eyes. Why is that? Is it that you are afraid, or is it because of some sort of radical belief? She pestered further. Momo, please. Kyoka pleaded, but I held my hand up, signaling that I was good. If you must know, I just hate heroes flat out. I respect that you three disagree, and it isn't my place to argue. I stated with as much respect as I could muster. No shit? Huh, I guess that's fair. Just didn't think that that would be the reason. Kyoka shrugged, seemingly content with how I handled it. Mina nodded, unconcerned, and not really paying attention to the conversation. And why do you hate them? What, do you look at genocidal and greedy maniacs and pray for them to win? She prodded again, making my blood lightly simmer. I find the whole thing to just seem so fake. The phrase, never meet your heroes, has lost all of its meaning with time, and everyone is just blinded by the phrase, anybody can be a hero. Even though when you think about the reverse meaning, it all makes sense. With every saint, there is an asshole. With every superhero, there is a supervillain in disguise. Even if they think they have good intentions, they do horrible things out of malice and greed, yet refuse to accept that they aren't who they say they are. I learned the difference between a real hero and a villain behind closed curtains a long time ago, and I guess I have just lost the will to be either one. I ranted on for a couple minutes, Kyoka nodding along solemnly, seemingly pondering, while Mina just seemed worried. Yaoyorozu on the other hand seemed almost offended. So you think of us as villains? She asked sternly, getting a quick glance from Kyoka. I took a sip of my lemonade, and set my cup down, taking a relaxing breath. Don't put words in my mouth. I am not saying anything about anybody specific. I simply don't want to get to know someone, work with someone only to find out that they are an egotistical asshole. I know nothing about you, so my thoughts are inconclusive. Without even responding with a nod, she went right back to her steak, seemingly no longer wanting to argue. Well, change of topic, who's your favorite hero? Like, one you have deemed real? Mina asked curiously, which I could only smile at. An actually decent question for once. If we were talking recently, it would go to Lunch Rush. He is underappreciated, yet he does so much for Japan as a whole, and is more capable than he looks. He has founded several food banks and soup kitchens across Japan, and his actual restaurant prices are nowhere near as hefty as what many would be willing to pay. He's just an upstanding guy, who is given too much shit. This was entirely true. The man deals with the snooty brats from this place, gets called the weakest hero on every website involving heroes, and by many is considered a joke of a hero. However, he is a hero who doesn't care what people say about him, as long as his food is able to help those across Japan. Hell, he has international food services, from restaurants to simple homeless shelters. The man is a saint, and nobody gives him respect. It's disgusting. He really does make fantastic food, huh? Even simple stuff like a smoothie and a strawberry tart are made into stuff that even rich snobs would want to eat. It's incredible. Mina chimes back in again, finally paying attention to the conversation as Kyoka giggled. You said, recently, earlier, but I believe that Mina was referring to who your all-time favorite was. Yaoyorozu just had to open her big mouth again. Oh, yeah. I forgot to correct you on that, Mina cheered, leaning over to me as Kyoka zoned out of the convo, a sly grin on her face. Well, if that were the case. It's a pretty controversial take, but I really liked Lady Nagant. I said, knowing that a disagreement would start, but not feeling in the mood to lie about a harmless opinion. Yaoyorozu's eyes widened in what seemed to be disgust, while Mina just looked worried. You mean? The one that snapped and killed the Hero Public Safety Committee officials? That Lady Nagant? Mina questioned nervously. Yep. Before everything that went down, she was a well-loved and respected hero, who always tried to do things the right way. I've been theorizing on her breakdown for years, and I think that there are a lot of details needed to determine a lot of the claims made against her. Nevertheless, she's in Tartarus, no getting answers now. I feigned reluctance, and shrugged my shoulders, not wishing to continue discussing the topic. After a moment of silence, someone decided to chime in. Just take a guess as to who. You continue to find ways to disgust me. You know that, Percival? I shrugged my shoulders at Yaoyorozu again, and went back to my lemonade. You can't just shrug that off. You are defending a psychotic murderer. Why? Is it because she saved you once? Or is it because you are one of those fuck-ups who finds anybody who is attractive to not be capable of such? The conversation ended a while ago, Yaoyorozu, so you can stop talking whenever. Yaoyorozu stood up from her seat, and turned to leave the cafeteria, allowing me to have a fresh, relieving breath. Well, I guess I won't question your reasons. Everybody has them after all. Mina relented nervously, earning a nod from me. I soon finished up my little snack, and got up to go to my next class. Kyoka nodded to me, and Mina waved goodbye happily, seemingly having already gotten over the conversation from before. Yaoyorozu was going to be annoying, and depending on how I play my cards, an actual possible threat. Even from simple opinion-based discussions, some people will simply just not trust me, I guess. I have got to be more careful. Izuku Pav. All I could hear was ringing. I could tell there was no actual sounds being emulated around the room I was now in out of nowhere, but my ears were simply ringing. My eyes burned at the sudden sight of the bright lamp looming over my bedridden body, and I raised my arm to block my eyes. As I raised my arm, I got a great view of bright red and black marks coating the back of them. In shock, I shot up to a sitting position, causing a sharp pain to spread across my back, and even my other arm. I yelled in pain, slowing my movements down as not to surprise my nerves. I assessed my arms, finding scars that far exceeded anything I had before, and I could only clench my teeth and bear it. I wouldn't suggest moving too much, your treatment is incomplete. I snapped my neck to look over at the sound of the voice, and found a small old lady who I recognized as Recovery Girl. Behind her, sitting in a small chair and looking at the floor, was my father. Not All Might, but his defeated, deflated, and destroyed form. Toshinori Yagi. What the hell happened to me? I asked nervously, breathing sharply as to push through the burning sensation on my back. From what I saw, you played with a rabid dog, and got mauled. I was in disbelief. Bakugo had done this. This was even worse than before, and it was already horrible before. Had I really embarrassed him that badly? Lay down, Sonny, you need to rest. You need to heal. As I slowly laid myself back down, she kissed me on the forehead, and I could feel a relaxant wash over my back in mere moments. It will take a bit, and the damage won't be completely removed, but it is the best I can do for now. Try to take it easier for a bit, you are already at a disadvantage. No need to make it worse, she advised me curtly, turning around, and waddling away without even so much as a farewell. Moments later, silence filled the room, and it was just me and Dad all alone. Listen, son, save it. I'm not in the mood for your lectures. I cut him off, knowing exactly what he was going to say. But that wasn't what I was. I said to shove it, didn't I? I thought you had gotten the hint, so what gives? Izuku, please. I just What about what I want? Huh? When did you ever give a damn to listen to me? What I wanted? When did you ever? I'm sorry. He shouted over me suddenly, cutting me off after I had cut him off initially. I was caught entirely off guard, having expected a grilling rather than whatever he was trying to do now. I never once believed you. Despite your scars, despite your desperation, I never bothered to care. To notice your success, notice your pain, notice my failures as a parent for Izumi. and as a mentor from young Bakugo. I know my apology means nothing, and I don't deserve your forgiveness, or even your consideration. Your pain, your life, it all stems from my failures. My biases, my angers, my doubts, and my favoritism that I never noticed until now. You made it into the greatest hero school without a quirk, without my help, and you are on track to have a future besting any future I could have possibly had, and I won't even have a right to be a part of it. I urge you not to forgive me if you wish not to, and I will not force you to have any form of discussion with me outside of school-related matters anymore if that is what you wish. I will see what I can do about Katsuki and Izumi regardless. My eyes felt like they were about to pop out of their sockets. Not out of anger, but I kept on telling myself that I was ready for anything, but clearly I fucking wasn't. What in the foo? Despite the fact that I kept telling myself not to, I felt my eyes begin to leak, and I could only allow my head to sink into my pillow, not knowing what to say. I guess that even now I was seeking his approval to an extent, but hearing all those things he had to say threw me off harder than I had ever expected it to. I need time to think. Please. With a nod of his head, All Might walked out of the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. My nature told me that I should forgive him, but then my training gave me the instinct to see the danger in making that decision. What if he wasn't genuine? What if he went back to how he was before? What if I'm willing to take the risk? Not immediately, but just talk to him. He has hurt me, he hurt Mom, and he was clueless the whole time, but maybe I can steer him down the right direction. My eyes began to close, the fatigue of Recovery Girl's quirk, the tiring conversation, and the pain of my injuries had tired me out rather quickly. As I soon fell into a silent slumber, one thought played with my mind. I'm gonna need to ask Mom about this. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Now we will see you in the next video.